Killed at least 112 Palestinians over the past day, including dozens of children and elders, in 3 separate attacks on schools where hundreds of displaced families took shelter. In the deadliest of the day's massacres, 29 people were killed when 4 Israeli missiles struck the Dar al-Aqam school in Gaza City. 18 children were among the dead, over 100 others wounded, with dozens believed to be trapped under the rubble. Separately, Israel bombed a water desalination plant east of Gaza City, its latest attack on civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Israel's ordered the forced expulsion of even more areas, this time from southern neighborhoods of Gaza City. Many of those affected have been displaced repeatedly over the last 18 months.
We haven't slept all of last night. It was a bloody night. We've placed roofs over us, but they flew away. We put up walls, but they fell on us. Where should we go? Where should we go, people? How long will we remain like this? How long will we keep evacuating and coming back every other day, evacuating, then coming back? Until when?
The United Nations says some 280,000 Palestinians have been newly displaced since Israel unilaterally ended the Gaza ceasefire in March. The Palestinian Center for Human Rights warns Israel's total blockade of Gaza, now in its 2nd month, has once again created famine conditions for some 2 million Palestinians relying on food aid. The U.S. Senate has voted down a pair of resolutions introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders to block $8.8 billion in new arms sales to Israel. On Thursday, no Republicans and just 14 Democrats voted alongside Senator Sanders to restrict the sale of massive bombs and other military equipment.
In the last 2 weeks, they have intensified their assault against the Palestinian people. According to UNICEF, since Netanyahu broke the ceasefire, more than 1,000 people have been killed, including over 300 children, and more than 600 children have been wounded.
Among Democrats voting against limiting arms sales to Israel was New Jersey Democrat Cory Booker. His vote came just 2 days after he delivered a 25-hour speech on the Senate floor promising to resist President Trump's agenda. Stock markets continue to plummet as President Trump's sweeping global tariffs drew widespread condemnation and plans for countermeasures. China, which is now subject to a 54% tariff, just announced a retaliatory 34% tariff on U.S. goods starting April 10th and accused the U.S. of bullying. French President Emmanuel Macron called for unity among European leaders and for the suspension of investments in the U.S.
I think what's important, and that's all the work that must be done by the sector, that future investments or investments announced in recent weeks should be suspended until things are clarified with the United States. Because what message will it send to have big European players investing billions of euros in the American economy at a time when we're being hit? So we must show collective solidarity.
France is also urging Europe to tax U.S. tech companies as part of a retaliatory strategy. Canada introduced a 25% tariff on U.S. cars and trucks. Here in the U.S., the automaker Stellantis said it's laying off 900 workers at 5 manufacturing plants after Trump's tariff plan was announced, and temporarily pausing production at assembly plants in Mexico and in Canada. In Washington, D.C., a newly introduced Senate bill with bipartisan support would limit Trump's authority to impose tariffs without going through Congress. In a separate challenge to Trump's trade war, the new Civil Liberties Alliance sued to block tariffs on China, arguing Trump unlawfully invoked emergency powers to impose them. Several analysts have pointed out Trump's tariff plan appears to have been based on math calculated by AI chatbots. South Korea's highest court has unanimously voted to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol 4 months after he tried and quickly failed to impose martial law.
By mobilizing the military and police to undermine the authority of constitutional institutions such as the National Assembly and violate the basic human rights of the people, he made a grave betrayal of the people's trust, who are the sovereign members of the Democratic Republic.
On the streets of Seoul, crowds broke out in cheers as the judgment was announced. Yoon's declaration of martial law on December 3rd triggered swift lawmaker action and massive public protest. South Korea's election commission will soon announce a date for a new election as Yoon's removal takes immediate effect. At least 7 people were killed Thursday after a boat carrying refugees capsized off the Greek island of Lesbos. 3 of those confirmed dead were children. 23 survivors have been rescued. Separately, authorities in Turkey say at least 9 people died Thursday in a shipwreck off its northern coast. According to UN data, 125 people were killed or went missing last year as they undertook the perilous maritime journey between Turkey and nearby Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. In Washington, D.C., President Trump fired at least 6 National Security Council staffers after an Oval Office meeting Wednesday with the far-right activist Laura Loomer. The firings came over the objections of National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, who was present at the meeting, and after Loomer reportedly handed Trump a list of people she considered disloyal. Among those ousted was General Timothy Hawk, who led both the National Security Agency and the U.S. Cyber Command. Loomer is a far-right conspiracy theorist, a self-described proud Islamophobe, and a longtime Trump supporter who was previously banned from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for hateful social media posts. The acting inspector general of the Pentagon is launching an investigation into Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of a Signal group chat to discuss U.S. war plans in Yemen, which accidentally included the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine. The Trump administration warned school and state officials across the country Thursday that federal education funding will be withdrawn unless public schools eliminate all DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The Education Department gave states 10 days to sign and return letters certifying compliance with the order. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, said in a statement, quote, "In the middle of a school year, the president is trying to bully the very same school districts that he insisted just a few weeks ago should be in charge of education. He's wielding a cudgel of billions in federal aid to tens of millions of children to force educators to kowtow to his politics and ideology," Weingarten said. Members of Elon Musk's Doge operation have gained access to a sensitive data system that contains the personal information of unaccompanied immigrant children, including their mental health records and reports of abuse. The data portal is run by the Department of Health and Human Services, which takes custody of unaccompanied children. Many agencies contracted by HHS to provide housing and other care have been accused of neglect and abuse, including sexual assault. The data breach comes after Doge made massive cuts to a watchdog agency within HHS that oversees the facilities where immigrant children are held. Doge staffers were also granted access to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services data systems. Illinois Congressmember Delia Ramirez, who is the daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, said in a statement, quote, "They've ordered the abduction of immigrant activists, the erratic cancellation of visas, the use of infamous offshore mega-prisons, and the violation of due process. It's deplorable that the sensitive information of temporary protected status, DACA applicants and recipients, visa holders, and naturalized individuals would be used to violate their rights," unquote. In Washington state, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents raided a roofing company in Bellingham County early Wednesday, arresting at least 37 immigrant workers. Witnesses say the agents showed up in unmarked vehicles. Workers were rounded up and processed in a warehouse on site before being loaded onto buses. The group's now being held at the troubled Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, where farm worker labor organizer Alfredo Lelo Juarez has also been jailed since last week. We'll have more on Lelo later in the broadcast. The Senate's confirmed Dr. Mehmet Oz to head the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The former TV host and doctor has long supported the privatization of Medicare and Medicaid. The confirmation comes one day after Senate Republicans unveiled a budget blueprint, which includes $4.5 trillion in tax breaks for the wealthy that Republicans would pay for by slashing Medicaid. A federal judge on Thursday temporarily blocked the Department of Health and Human Services from terminating $11 billion in federal health funding that was allocated to states during the COVID-19 pandemic. Judge Mary McElroy sided with the 23 Democratic states in the District of Columbia, which argued the withdrawal of funding would create chaos and threaten the delivery of life-saving care. And parts of the central United States are bracing for potentially historic flooding after roughly 100 tornadoes hit the region Wednesday. At least 7 people were killed in Tennessee, Missouri, and Indiana as homes and, in some cases, entire neighborhoods were flattened. Severe weather alerts were also issued in the state of Arkansas, Illinois, Mississippi, and Kentucky, where Governor Andy Beshear warned residents Wednesday of more life-threatening conditions.
When we have this much rain, it's the decisions about when to get out, about what to drive through, when to go stay with someone else that can be the difference between life and death.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy.
Welcome back. I want to get to a couple more important stories this morning. First, the Pentagon's acting inspector general has announced an investigation into Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's role in the Signal messaging app incident, where top national security officials mistakenly added a journalist to a discussion revealing attack plans in Yemen. Multiple outlets obtained the memo written by the acting IG. The move would contradict comments made on Monday by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who said the case was closed. Meanwhile, President Trump has fired multiple top national security officials. The director and number 2 official at the NSA were ousted yesterday, along with 3 National Security Council members. While no reason was immediately given, the wave of firings followed an Oval Office meeting on Wednesday between Trump, Vice President JD Vance, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, as well as far-right activist and conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer. In that meeting, Loomer reportedly expressed her dissatisfaction with some officials on Trump's national security team, calling them disloyal. That's according to 3 people familiar with the matter who all spoke to NBC News. When asked by reporters about this, Trump denied that Loomer had anything to do with the National Security Council staffers who were fired. I will note, though, that some Trump staffers continue to be mystified at the hold that Loomer has over Trump. We saw it during the campaign and potentially again now. All right, we'll be right back with more Morning Joe.
Mimicked a Nazi.
Just moments ago, President Trump, he's busy on Truth Social this morning. He just posted there in all caps, writing, "China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing they cannot afford to do." Joining us now, NBC News senior business analyst and host of the 11th Hour, our friend Stephanie Ruhle. Steph, so much to get to, but let's just start there with the China piece of this. To repeat, about 2 hours back, they announced their retaliatory tariffs, 34%. Now we have President Trump weighing in, claiming that they played it wrong. What do you think?
Played it wrong in all caps. This is not a game. Nobody wins in a trade war. And this is sort of this thing that the president likes to say, I don't like what China's doing. Nobody's winning. And the president's lack of understanding with how trade works. What have we seen in the last 2 months? We've seen our allies like South Korea and Japan start to move closer to China in trading agreements and the United States further away. What's stunning to me, in the last 48 hours, I have reached out to so many people in the Trump universe, business people who have supported President Trump. And Jonathan, I cannot find one single investor with one single argument that makes sense for these tariffs. All I'm getting is, well, this is what the president thinks. This is what he's always wanted to do. And because he's the president, let's give him some time. There is no rational argument that any credible economist has given why this works. The argument is that they're trying to reshuffle world order, that we should change how consumerism works here. The United States is not a country that's focused on long-termism. Remember when the Biden administration tried to say that inflation was transitory, i.e. short-term, and nobody was having it because they're saying, I can't afford my rent, I can't afford eggs, I can't afford bacon. Well, now here we have an administration, a Treasury Secretary saying, cool your jets. We're going to have short-term pain for long-term solutions, and not one person has laid out a long-term solution for us.
Boy, it's so important that you bring up the fact that the Biden administration was late on figuring out just how dangerous inflation would be to working Americans. And again, said it was transitory. It ended up not being transitory. But, Steph, it's very interesting. You bring up the Treasury Secretary, who, again, a couple of weeks ago said, cheap goods, affordable goods. not a God-given right for American consumers, and then saying yesterday, well, other countries shouldn't push back against these high tariffs. They're just going to do that, and we showed some clips of Scott Bessent. He looked very uncomfortable, and I suspect it's because neither he nor many of the people who are advising the president, and certainly not those on Wall Street supporting him, actually agree with the president on tariffs. I mean, Donald Trump stands almost completely alone in believing that he can reorder, 45 years of globalism.
Bingo, Joe. My sources say that Scott Bessent is kind of the odd man out here. And in the inner circle that Trump has, he's not even close to Scott Bessent or listening to him. Some have said to me he's looking for an exit door to try to get himself to the Fed, because in the last few days, he's really hurting his own credibility and history in the markets. Those who have said this man actually understands how the markets work, and what's happening right now is only going to hurt markets. And even for Scott Bessent to say a few weeks ago, getting cheap goods fast is not part of the American dream. No, it's not part of the American dream, but it's part of the way Americans live, especially people who are economically vulnerable. They don't have the option to say, nope, I like higher things that cost more. They need low-cost things because they don't make that much money.
Let's bring in right now Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. He's a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committee. And, Senator, you were, of course, a sponsor of a bill that actually passed the Senate with the help of 4 Republicans to kind of pull back, to claw back those tariffs on Canada. What's going on with that, and what other countries are you looking at?
Joe, great to be on with you this morning. Yes, we had a vote 2 days ago, and we got 4 Republicans and every Democrat to challenge Donald Trump's unnecessary Canada tariffs. He declared an emergency under a specious pretext to put these 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, and the Senate rejected him on it. The first time that the Republicans have joined us to push back against Donald Trump's policies. We're now in the House trying to get it passed, but events have taken over. Donald Trump has now levied tariffs against the entire world, taxes against American consumers, a national sales tax, and you're going to see us challenge those Wednesday, Day of Liberation tariffs as well. Likely we'll file next week.
So, Senator, good morning. I mean, the words global trade war have been bandied about the last 48 hours or so. What are your concerns about exactly that? And it's not just that President Trump is levying tariffs against a rival like China, but also so many of our allies. What does that do for our alliances and national security?
Well, why pick a fight with an ally? We need to link arms with allies. And the president's juvenile actions toward Canada, calling him the 51st state, calling the prime minister governor, have been just embarrassing and juvenile. But now he's levying heavy tariffs against South Korea and Japan. And I'm sure you all noted that they had discussions with China this week about forging closer trade alliances and a free trade agreement. We don't want our allies deciding that China is a more reliable partner than the United States. Are you kidding me? And so that's the concern. And then the concern is really right at home. I talk to Virginians all the time. They remember Donald Trump's tariffs from his first term. It hurt Virginians. It especially hurt Virginia agriculture. And these tariffs are at a much greater level than the first term tariffs. So we've got all kinds of farmers and foresters and those who make or use agricultural products. 35% of the aluminum and steel that go into ships and subs we build in this country come from Canada. That's becoming more expensive, which is going to weaken our national security. It's time to quit going after allies. Let's link arms with allies and face off against adversaries rather than the reverse.
Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, we know you have to run, but thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And as we go to break, here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio at a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Brussels earlier today, a short time ago, expressing confidence that markets would recalibrate amid the global sell-off.
Businesses around the world, including in trade and global trade, they just need to know what the rules are. Once they know what the rules are, they will adjust to those rules. So I don't think it's fair to say economies are crashing. Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States. We have to be a country that thinks we're the largest consumer market in the world, and yet the only thing we export is services. And we need to stop that. We need to get back to a time where we're a country that can make things, and to do that, we have to reset the global order of trade.
People were stabbed in a neighborhood in Northeast Washington, including a grandmother and her 2 granddaughters. They are expected to survive. We're told the suspect is in custody tonight. This evening, several parents have been charged following a brawl during a youth hockey tournament in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. Coaches and parents coming out of the court joining the fight. 3 parents have been charged with assault and disorderly conduct. When we come back here tonight, Bruce Springsteen's lost album's about to be revealed, and you have to see those remarkable images from the Philadelphia Zoo. She's a first-time mom at 97. To the Index, Bruce Springsteen revealing a treasure of never-before-heard songs. The boss will release 7 so-called lost albums in June. The collection includes 83 songs he wrote between 1983 and 2018. When we come back tonight, the endangered tortoise, a first-time mom at 97, and you'll see her and the baby.
With breaking news that the comedian Russell Brand has been charged with sexual assault offences, including rape and indecent assault. Our correspondent Ashna Hernag is here for more on this. This is a press release from the Metropolitan Police. What have we heard?
Well, we know that detectives have been investigating the 50-year-old comedian since September 2023 after the broadcasting of a Channel 4 Dispatches documentary in conjunction with The Times and The Sunday Times, an investigation that aired then. Following that, a number of allegations were brought to the Metropolitan Police and they began investigating the comedian. It was alleged at the time by several women that one woman was raped in the Bournemouth area in 1999. In 2001, there was another allegation of a woman being indecently assaulted in London, and again in 2004 another woman was orally raped and sexually assaulted also in the capital, and again in 2004 and 2005 a woman was sexually assaulted again in London. Today, as you say, the Metropolitan Police have now charged Russell Brand with 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape and 2 counts of sexual assault between 1999 and 2005, and the charges relate to 4 separate women. We've heard from Detective Superintendent Andy Furphy. He has been leading this investigation since it began, as I say, in 2023. He has said that the women who have made the reports continue to receive support from specially trained officers. The Met's investigation remains open, and detectives ask anyone who's been affected by this case or anyone who has any information to come forward and speak with police. A dedicated team of investigators, he goes on to say, is available to them.
Concerned about the snobbery and contempt and condemnation in which people that support Donald Trump are plainly held by his detractors. And this is while you have an administration that's emulating his policies, plagiarizing from Donald Trump, while simultaneously criminalizing him through the weaponization of the legal system. In a straight choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, if you care about democracy, if you care about freedom, I don't know how you can do anything other than vote for Donald Trump for precisely the reasons that they claim that you can't vote for Donald Trump.
Comedian Russell Brand has been charged this afternoon in connection with the following offences: 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, 2 counts of sexual assault. Detectives say they began investigating Brand in September 2023 after receiving a number of allegations, which followed the reporting by the Channel 4 Dispatches programme and the Sunday Times. The Met Police say it's alleged that in 1999 a woman was raped in the Bournemouth area. In 2001, a woman was indecently assaulted in the Westminster area of London. In 2004, a woman was orally raped and sexually assaulted in the Westminster area of London. And between 2004 and 2005, a woman was sexually assaulted in the Westminster area of London. He will appear
plainly held by his detractors. And this is while you have an administration that's emulating his policies, plagiarizing from Donald Trump, while simultaneously criminalizing him through the weaponization of the legal system. In a straight choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, if you care about democracy, if you care about freedom, I don't know how you can do anything other than vote for Donald Trump for precisely.
Pocket threads it through. Third.
Tonight here, the first-time mom at 97 and one of her babies right here at the team at the Philadelphia Zoo, America Strong.
Tonight at the Philadelphia Zoo, a new incredible world record. A first-time mom at 97 years old and her babies. 4 critically endangered western Santa Cruz Galapagos tortoise hatchlings have just hatched. Less than 50 are known to exist in America.
Hi, David.
Their care team introducing us.
They represent a new genetic lineage of this species in human care, and we're so happy to have them.
Tonight, the zoo telling us they are proud to protect the endangered population and proud of that new mom. They call her Mommy. And they say, remarkably, she is a first-time mother at 97 years old. Now the oldest known first-time mother ever of her species.
Hi, David.
Zookeeper Jason Alfondre.
She is our oldest and longest tenured resident, estimated hatching in 1928 and has been here since 1932. So she's about as Philly as it gets.
Tonight, the zoo saying the babies are healthy. They'll be ready to make their big public debut on April 23rd, about 3 weeks from tonight.
Congratulations, Mommy!
Congrats to you.
The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium has announced the sudden passing of one of its most beloved residents, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. On March 25, 2025, the 33-year-old silverback died from a sudden cardiac event. Despite immediate medical efforts, he couldn't be revived. Now, gorillas, just like humans, are highly susceptible to heart disease. Harry had been receiving treatment for a cardiac condition since 2022 with guidance from the Great Ape Heart Project. But sadly, his time came sooner than anyone expected. Harry wasn't just any gorilla. Born at the Cincinnati Zoo on June 14, 1991, he moved to Pittsburgh a year later and quickly became a favorite. Over 3 decades, he grew into a gentle but strong leader. After the passing of Mrithi in 2024, Harry stepped up as the troop's protector, becoming a father figure to the little ones. The zoo's curator of mammals, Kelsey Forbes, described him as amazing with all of the gorilla kids, and said he had the best laugh of them all. If you ever met Harry, you'll remember his fiery red hair and playful personality. He loved keeping visitors on their toes, sometimes even giving them a friendly scare. But behind his playful antics was a sobering truth. Western lowland gorillas like Harry are critically endangered, facing habitat loss and poaching in the wild. His passing reminds us how precious these animals truly are. Harry will be deeply missed by the zoo staff, visitors, and all who knew him. If you have a favorite memory of him, the Pittsburgh Zoo is inviting everyone to share stories on their social media pages. The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium remains committed to the conservation of western lowland gorillas and will continue to provide exceptional care for its remaining troop members. Rest in peace, Harry. You were truly one of a kind.
From the Pittsburgh Zoo, they announced the death of a longtime family member, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. The 33-year-old gorilla died of a sudden cardiac event yesterday. The zoo says he was loved by staff and visitors since he came to Pittsburgh all the way back in 1992.
Gazans fled and sought shelter on Thursday as Israeli forces advanced into the ruins of Rafah. What they are doing to us is unjust. It is a shame. This is not a life. Every day we are moving from one place to another, this woman said. Israel's assault to capture the city is part of a newly announced security zone they intended to seize, and is a major escalation in the war, which began with a Hamas attack on Israeli communities on October 7, 2023. Israel restarted the conflict last month after effectively abandoning a ceasefire in place since January. A day after declaring their intention to capture large swaths of the crowded enclave, Israeli forces pushed into the city. Rafah had served as a last refuge for people fleeing other areas for much of the war. Gaza's health ministry reported at least 97 people killed in Israeli strikes in the past 24 hours. Later on Thursday, local health authorities said an Israeli airstrike killed at least 27 Palestinians, including women and children, at a school serving as a shelter. The Israeli military said the attack hit key Palestinian terrorists. Footage released by the Israeli military on Wednesday showed troops operating in southern Gaza and airstrikes on what is said to be terrorist infrastructure. Reuters was not able to independently verify the location and date the video was filmed. Gazans who had returned to homes in the ruins during the ceasefire have now been ordered to flee communities on the northern and southern edges of the Strip. They fear Israel intends to depopulate those areas indefinitely, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless while Israel seizes some of Gaza's last agricultural land and critical water infrastructure. Israel has not spelled out its long-term aims for the security zone its troops are now seizing. Its stated goal since the start of the war has been the destruction of the Hamas militant group, which ran Gaza for nearly 2 decades.
If you live anywhere here in the red circled area and you have an old...
South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol was ousted from office on Friday over his short-lived attempt at martial law. The Constitutional Court's 8 justices ruled unanimously to uphold Parliament's motion to impeach Yoon. The turmoil set off since his surprise declaration of martial law last year sparked the country's worst political crisis in decades. On Friday, the court's acting Chief Justice said Yoon violated his duty as president by taking actions that were beyond the powers given to him under the Constitution. Cheers erupted from thousands of anti-Yoon protesters upon hearing the ruling. There have been months of protests, both in support of Yoon and of his removal, after his martial law decree in December. He has said it was needed to root out, quote, anti-state elements. Yoon lifted the decree 6 hours later after lawmakers defied efforts by security forces to seal off parliament and then voted to reject it. Yoon has said he never intended to fully impose emergency military rule and tried to downplay the fallout. He argued he was trying to sound the alarm over the main opposition party's abuse of its parliamentary majority. The Constitutional Court rejected most of his argument, saying there were legal avenues to address disagreements. A lawyer for Yoon told reporters on Friday that the court's ruling was legally implausible and, quote, a political decision. On Friday, it remained unclear if the political chaos that has unfolded since December will now be eased by the court ruling. A presidential election is now required to take place within 60 days, according to the country's constitution. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will continue to serve as acting president until a new leader is inaugurated. In January, Yoon became the first sitting South Korean president to be arrested. The 64-year-old also faces a separate criminal trial on insurrection charges.
Residents of the separatist enclave of white Afrikaners in South Africa want US President Donald Trump to help them become a state. A group of them was so opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended some 3 decades ago, they carved out the enclave. Orania, population 3,000, is the only town in South Africa where all residents, including menial workers, are white. Last week, community leaders visited the United States, seeking recognition as an autonomous entity. Orania movement leader Just Strijdom, surrounded by bronzes of past Afrikaner leaders, including from the era of racist white minority rule, had a message for those stateside.
If whomever is interested in helping create Orania's future, we think investment is a good opportunity. Our message to the American government was help us here, 3-word response. It was not to say help us here by giving us American tax dollars so that we can just, do whatever.
Trump offered in February to resettle white South African farmers and their families as refugees. Strijdom said that wasn't the point.
We are glad that we are recognized as a people, but we don't want to be refugees in another man's land.
South African authorities acknowledge Orania as a town that can raise local taxes and deliver services. The 8,000-hectare settlement is riding an unprecedented wave of support from right-wing Americans for Afrikaner nationalists who lost power when apartheid ended in 1994 and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. 3 senior Orania officials interviewed by Reuters were vague about the help they sought in the United States. They said they wanted investment to build houses to keep up with its 15% population growth, infrastructure and energy independence. Strijdom declined to say whether his delegation had contact with the Trump administration. The US State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Political analyst Nikki Falkoff believes Afrikaner groups want a return to apartheid.
I think for a long time Orania and people around that kind of politics have been relatively careful about how they portray themselves. And they have made a big effort to go, we're just living peaceably side by side with our neighbors of other colors. We choose to only be white people, but that's okay because this is our space and we
Political analyst Nikki Falkoff believes Afrikaner groups want a return to apartheid.
I think for a long time, Orania and people around that kind of politics have been relatively careful about how they portray themselves. And they have made a big effort to go, we're just living peaceably side by side with our neighbors of other colors. We choose to only be white people, but that's okay because this is our space and we will live in this way. And what's happened now, I think, has emboldened them slightly more to go, no, well, actually, we would like apartheid back, please.
Some US right-wingers have sought to align with Afrikaners in their opposition to diversity policies. South Africa's black empowerment laws have been ridiculed by Trump's South African-born advisor, Elon Musk. A third of all South Africans are out of work, most of them poor blacks.
All the spending we have seen on AI doesn't actually lead to any revenue.
Bump in the road as first quarter deliveries fell 13%. That's according to figures released Wednesday. The electric vehicle giant was hurt by a backlash against CEO Elon Musk's political stance. And it was also hit by rising competition and its aging lineup of electric vehicles. Tesla delivered 336,681 vehicles in the first quarter, well below analyst expectations. That was down from close to 387,000 a year ago. Musk had pledged a return to growth after Tesla's annual deliveries dipped last year. But his advisory role to US President Donald Trump has led to discontent among some customers. Musk has been instrumental in firing thousands of federal workers and cutting humanitarian aid. Protests at Tesla stores in the US and Europe have spiked, and Tesla cars have been vandalized. Some data also points to a rise in Tesla owners trading in their vehicles. Investors are waiting to see if refreshed models like the Model Y and incentives have helped counter weak demand and tough competition from Chinese and European rivals. A trade body said China's BYD could overtake Tesla as the top global EV seller for the first time this year, with a 15.7% market share.
I love Tesla.
You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
This is really amazing.
Feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching a war that would have never happened if I was president, and a war that would have never happened if I was president, and
Democrats are determined to call more witnesses when the Senate trial begins. They especially want to hear from the White House budget official who told the Pentagon to withhold military aid to Ukraine. New explosive documents show Michael Duffy made that phone call just 90 minutes after the controversial conversation between Trump and the president of Ukraine. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
House and Senate leaders still at an impasse over the Senate impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump. Republicans want a quick trial, possibly with no witnesses. But Democrats are demanding to hear from White House insiders, including acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and White House budget official Michael Duffy.
What is a trial with no witnesses and no documents? It's a sham trial.
Just released court-ordered documents show Duffy told the Pentagon to withhold military aid from Ukraine on July 25th, 90 minutes after President Trump asked Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden. And Duffy told the Pentagon to keep it quiet. Duffy was subpoenaed by the House in October but refused to testify. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still withholding the articles of impeachment from the Senate until she's assured there will be a trial, prompting the president to lash out.
Crazy Nancy, she's crazy. No. So now she says, she has no case. She has no case, so let's not submit it. That's good, right?
Republican senators say Pelosi is holding back the articles because the case against the president is weak.
The case is pretty thin that the House is sending over us, if they ever send it over to us. Pretty thin gruel from my standpoint.
Democrats hitting back.
If he really believes it's thin because the President of the United States ordered his top people who were in the room, who have firsthand knowledge, not to testify. He ordered documents not to be turned over.
Senate Democrats are still demanding those witnesses and documents, but the Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, and they are in charge now, so that's unlikely to happen. As for those new Pentagon documents, White House officials say there is nothing new in them, as they predict a quick Senate trial and the president's acquittal. Robin?
Jennifer Johnson.
Invasion of Ukraine. All those people are dead. Putin's heinous attack on a proud and sovereign nation shocks the conscience of every person of goodwill. But it would have never happened in Ukraine. It would have never happened, 100% certain. In fact, it would have never happened in Ukraine. It would have never happened, 100% certain. In what's happened, I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president. And
to force a foreign leader to aid his re-election. In turn, the president says he'll release the record of a critical phone call. Congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins begins our coverage.
A dizzying day of developments. At the Capitol late this afternoon, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi went further than ever on formally beginning impeachment.
The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the president's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections. Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
Meanwhile, at the United Nations, the president arrived this morning to talk about U.S. policy, but immediately faced questions about his own actions and whether he pressured Ukraine to investigate the Biden family.
I think it's ridiculous. It's a witch hunt.
He seemed to confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently.
My complaint has always been, and I'd withhold again. And
Seemed to confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently.
I love Tesla.
You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
This is really amazing.
To Jonathan Lemir's left side is what Americans are going to be looking at today for their 401ks, and also what the White House is going to be looking at today. Staffers, they understand they can't take another beating today like they took in the markets yesterday without Republicans on the Hill getting very nervous. Hey, that does it for us this morning. Thank you so much for being with us this week. It means the world to us. We'll see you on Monday, or actually we'll see you tomorrow morning. Ana Cabrera picks up the coverage after a short break.
In the offseason, I'm a
Happening now, breaking news. Stocks tumble. China retaliates, but a stronger than expected jobs report. We'll break down all the latest economic indicators that are coming in. Plus, firings at the NSA, both the director and the deputy director from the highly sensitive National Security Agency are now gone after far-right activist Laura Loomer met with President Trump and advocated for their firings. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with the breaking news. U.S. stocks are tumbling for the second day. The Dow is already down 1,000 points after dropping almost 1,700 points yesterday. This comes amid President Trump's escalating trade war and despite a stronger than expected new jobs report just out this morning. Also affecting the markets this morning, retaliation from China. Beijing announced it's responding to the White House's sweeping tariffs with 34% new tariffs of its own against the United States. Let's go live right now to New York and CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich, who's standing by. Vanessa, you're watching all of this. Break it down for us. First of all, start with the jobs report that came out this morning.
Yeah, well, this jobs report, better than expected jobs report, may have softened the opening on Wall Street just a little bit. But look at stocks right now. Look at where markets are really tumbling this morning as investors are pricing in really the worst case scenario, a trade war escalation. They are looking for some sense that the administration is willing to negotiate with countries. That does not seem to be the case. Investors telling me that their trust has been just completely eroded as this trade war escalates. As you mentioned, though, a bright spot, the jobs report, better than expected numbers in March. Hiring picked up 228,000. That's more than 100,000, or about 100,000 more than expected. And the unemployment rate ticking up to about 4.2%, just slightly from 4.1%. But really, as investors are telling me, this is ancient news at this point. This is looking backwards in March. Really, everything changed on April 2nd when President Trump announced these universal tariffs, and Wall Street was waiting for retaliation from major trading partners. And we heard from China just this morning a 34% tariff on all U.S. exports going into China. That's about $143 billion worth of goods every single year. Things like chemicals, computers, agriculture products, which I will note already have previous tariffs on them from 2018 during President Trump's first term, and also retaliatory tariffs that went into place in March. So an escalation on that front. You also see there that's going to impact transportation and oil and gas coming out of the United States. But worth noting, though, that we, the U.S., get a lot more from China than we send them. We get about $438 billion worth of goods every single year. And that now also, because of what President Trump put in place, has a 34% tariff on those goods. Economists agree, Wolf, that those prices, those increase in prices, will likely get passed down to us, the U.S. consumers. Wolf?
Yeah, they almost certainly will. All right, Vanessa Yurkevich reporting for us. Thank you very much. China, as we've been reporting, is imposing this new 34% retaliatory tariff on all imports from the United States starting April 10th. I want to go live to Beijing right now. CNN's Mark Stewart is watching all of this unfold. Mark, this is a major escalation in an already very contentious trade war between the U.S. and China. What are you learning?
No question, Wolf. A very hectic evening here in Beijing as well as in Washington as we try to sort out exactly how hard these tariffs are going to hit. As one analyst told me, this is a very strong response from China. Let me just pick up on a few points that Vanessa made about who these tariffs will target or hit the most. These specifically will hit American farmers and the agriculture industry very hard. China imports a lot of soybeans, of all products, from the United States. It's been a top customer. The fact that these products, these soybean products, are going to cost even more are certainly going to be a big blow to American farmers, especially as China looks elsewhere to buy soybeans and other agricultural products. Also on the list, rare minerals. Rare minerals are important because they are used to help make things such as electronics products, different products that people use in their homes. They're necessary at a time when the Trump administration is really trying to encourage more domestic manufacturing. If these products are hard to get, it certainly could impact life in America. I also want to point out about the timing of all of this. This is happening on a Friday night, the start of a very important holiday weekend here in China. For Beijing to make the move that it did so late at night at a very important time, it really says a lot about the impact of all of this. And then there's the broader question, will this lead to a bigger discussion between Xi Jinping and President Trump? One thing that China has to be careful about, its economy right now is dealing with a lot of weakness, so it may be vulnerable and may have to use some caution, Wolf, when dealing with D.C.
Yeah, and we can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, the Dow Jones down once again today, more than 1,000 points already. Mark Stewart in Beijing. We'll watch it together with you. Also new this morning, a major shakeup in the U.S. intelligence community. Sources telling CNN that the Trump White House has fired the director and the deputy director of the top secret National Security Agency, the NSA. The news of the top-level dismissals follow the firings of at least 4 National Security Council staffers over at the White House. Sources telling CNN that far-right activist Laura Loomer, who visited President Trump on Wednesday, advocated for these firings. Loomer, by the way, once claimed that the 9/11 terror attack against the United States was an inside job. Let's go live right now to CNN White House reporter Elena Treen. Elena, what are you hearing? What's the reaction you're getting from top administration officials this morning?
I mean, well, it's hard to overstate just how significant these firings are. I mean, the White House has now dismissed the top 2 officials at the National Security Agency, General Timothy Hogg, the director of the NSA. He's also the head of a U.S. Cyber Command. He was Senate confirmed, and then also Hogg's deputy, Wendy Noble. Now, this comes, of course, as the United States intelligence community is still trying to navigate a lot of the changes that they've been seeing over the last several months since President Trump took office. But almost as interesting, if not as equally as interesting, is how all of these firings came about. We know now that they come after Laura Loomer, a far-right activist, someone who once said that 9/11 was an inside job. She met directly with President Donald Trump in the Oval Office on Wednesday. I was told that she brought a list of around a dozen names of people that she deemed disloyal to him and to this White House. And it's clear that he was influenced by this. When I talked to different sources who were familiar with that meeting, I also spoke with Loomer herself directly. They said that she directly led to some of these firings, that she was the one who got in President Trump's ear and convinced him to move forward with these dismissals. Now, something that's interesting, just to give you some context of this, because I've covered Loomer's relationship with the president for, a couple years now. She was someone who actually had pretty good access and proximity to him on the campaign trail. She rode with him on his private plane. But then some of the top officials, including then campaign manager Susie Wiles, now, of course, Trump's chief of staff, kind of put the kibosh on that. What's clear, though, is she now has regained some of that access and clearly regained some of that influence. Well,
do we have any idea why the new White House chief of staff allowed her to come into the White House to meet with the president?
Look, Susie Wiles is someone who has been very careful about who gets access to him. It's surprising that Loomer was able to get an Oval Office meeting. I think a lot of this, though, is coming from President Donald Trump himself. He spoke with reporters about this yesterday. He said that he likes to listen to her. He likes to take some of her ideas, and then he makes some of the decisions based off of that.
All right, Elena Treen at the White House for us. Thank you very much. Also new this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio concluding meetings with top European leaders at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. He addressed everything from volatile U.S. markets amid President Trump's trade war to reaffirming America's strong commitment to NATO. Let's go live right now to CNN's Alex Marquardt. He's joining us from NATO headquarters in Brussels. Alex, I know you had a chance to ask a question to Secretary Rubio earlier this morning. What did we learn?
Well, Wolf, the tariffs news has really loomed large over this 2 days of meetings. I spoke with the Canadian Foreign Minister yesterday, who said that it's hard to talk about NATO business in the middle of a trade war. And rather predictably, Marco Rubio defended his boss's decision to put tariffs on so much of the rest of the world. And he said that businesses and markets will readjust as they learn the new rules. Here's a little bit more of what he told reporters.
I don't think it's fair to say economies are crashing. Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States.
Wolf, rather remarkable there that he acknowledged that the markets are indeed crashing. He went on to say that we have to reset the global order of trade. And then I asked him about the ongoing Russia negotiations to get to a peace deal. He revealed that he had met with top Kremlin aide Kirill Dmitriev before coming here to Brussels. And he said that the message essentially to the Russians was that the clock is ticking, that the U.S. wants to know whether or not Russia is indeed sincere about peace, and that they want to know that soon. He said in the next few weeks was the time frame that he put on it, and that Dmitriev should take that message back to Moscow. So essentially putting the ball back in Russia's court. I also asked Rubio if they planned on any more of these meetings that we've seen in the past few weeks. He said, we're not going to have more negotiations about negotiations. So right now, it seems, Wolf, the U.S. is waiting for that answer from Russia. Wolf.
We'll see what that answer is. Alex Marquardt reporting from NATO headquarters. Thank you very much. Also happening now, dozens of catastrophic tornadoes and violent storms slamming the central U.S. this week. Across Tennessee, Missouri, and Indiana, 7 people have already been killed as houses and businesses were leveled throughout the region. Here's the account of one survivor.
The whole backside of the house is leaning, like it's the whole house. Yeah. It's the whole house. I just bought this house 2 years ago.
And millions of Americans are still at risk as the threat of tornadoes and once-in-a-lifetime flooding still remains. Let's go live right now to CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. He's got the latest developments for us. Derek, where's the greatest risk for what could be generational flooding?
Yeah, Wolf, if the threat of tornadoes isn't enough, the flooding is going to make the misery even worse for many locations. So right now we're monitoring heavy rain across Kentucky, western Tennessee, and parts of Arkansas. This was the scene yesterday coming out of Nashville. Look at these inundated vehicles. Those are complete write-offs in terms of an insurance standpoint, right? The moment you get water into an engine, that car no longer functions properly. And this is all part of a wider range of rain that has fallen from the Ohio River Valley, stretching southwestward towards the Arklatex region. And some of these rainfall totals have been impressive. This is radar estimated, but some locations have picked up over a foot, likely, according to this radar output. Right now, it is still raining heavily, and what makes this so ominous is that these precipitation, or this rain band, is moving over the same locations for several hours, if not days at a time. So western Kentucky, western Tennessee, that's an area we're monitoring with considerable tags.
And this is remarkable, how a far-right 9/11 conspiracy peddler, Laura Loomer, ended up inside the White House with a list of National Security Council officials she wanted fired, and how, somehow, the president did just that, with their boss, the National Security Advisor, sitting there, apparently powerless. Good evening, John Berman here, in for Anderson. This time last night, Americans in the world were bracing for impact from the president's tariff rollout. Today, the first blow landed. Stocks, and with them, millions of retirement accounts, took a beating today, here and abroad. And as trading begins right now in Tokyo, here's what those investors will be following. The Dow lost almost 4% of its value. The S&P almost 5%. The NASDAQ just a hair shy of 6%. There are those who get caught up in what superlatives to use, but how about this? It was a bad, bad day. European and Asian markets sank as well, which made for a grim split screen even before U.S. markets opened, as members of the administration talked up the tariffs. Here is Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins this morning with stock futures tanking as she talked.
We are really, really excited and very grateful to President Trump's leadership and being willing to be bold and fearless in facing some pretty big policy challenges around the world.
An hour later, markets opened, racking up their worst day since 2020, something the president discounted as it was happening and then after the fact aboard Air Force One.
The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom.
Got to give it a little chance, but we're taking in jobs and we're taking in industry and we're taking in trillions of dollars. I think our markets are going to boom. Got to give it a little bit of time.
Right, that said, as much as markets can be viewed as a snapshot of the moment, they also reflect what investors think about the future, as in future prices and profits, what consumers will have in their pockets to spend, and jobs. And although the president said today the operation is over and the patient is healing, it may be that the operation was performed without anesthetic and they just made the first incisions. In other words, this could be the painful beginning, not the end of whatever the post-tariff world might become. Take the 25% car tariff that started today. The impact of that is just starting. Today, Chrysler and Jeep maker Stellantis paused production at several plants in Canada and Mexico. Not our problem, you say? Well, the move affected 5 American facilities supplying parts to those plants, triggering 900 layoffs here. There is followed as well already in the form of retaliation. Canada's Prime Minister today announced a 25% counter tariff on cars and said this about America's future on the world stage.
The global economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday.
the system of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over. Well, this is a tragedy. It is also the new reality.
So that new reality will likely be more expensive. Volkswagen today said it will pass on the cost of tariffs to consumers and single it out as a line item, added import fee on the window sticker. For those who believe, as the president often says, that foreign countries and not consumers pay for tariffs, this is a reminder that it's often not so. And it won't be the only one. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation, these new tariffs will cost the average household an additional $2,100 a year for the things they buy and shrink their after-tax income by about 2%. And just before airtime, this headline of the Wall Street Journal, analysts at JP Morgan raised their forecast of a global recession happening this year to 60%. We're going to have more shortly from a panel of top economy watchers on the immediate and longer-term impact of these tariffs. And we're going to be joined by Democratic Senator Tina Smith, who hails from a border state and sits on the Finance Committee. First, though, the very latest on the man who is making this all possible, the president. Let's get right to CNN Chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins as she gets ready to anchor the source at the top of the hour. So, Caitlin, what has the president been saying today about this tariff plan?
Well, we heard from the president, John, as he was leaving the White House earlier. He's going down to South Florida, and he only took one question from reporters as he was departing the White House and essentially likened this to a surgical operation, saying that he believes that once they get through this, that in the end, the patient, that situation being the United States and the economy and U.S. consumers and businesses, will be better off. So essentially shrugging off the turmoil that we have seen inside the stock markets today and predicting that it will get better, something that later when he was speaking with reporters, he reaffirmed that comment on Air Force One. We just heard from the Vice President, JD Vance, who was likening it to one bad day in the stock market and also saying that he thought things could have been worse than they were today, despite seeing this huge, wipeout in gains, the sell-off, one of the worst days in the stock market since 2020. And the president, though, has been talking to reporters as everyone's kind of trying to read the tea leaves. And when I say everyone, I mean world leaders and business leaders in terms of what the president intends to do with these tariffs and how long he intends to keep them on. Because that was a question I had for the Treasury Secretary last night. Are these permanent tariffs that are being put in place? And he essentially said, wait to see. He did not make the argument that these tariffs are here to stay. And obviously that's something businesses are watching very closely. And despite the president's aides going out today and saying this is not a negotiating tool, that the president is deadly serious about keeping these tariffs in place and restructuring the way the the global economy works, the president himself acknowledged on Air Force One to reporters that he does view this as a negotiating tool. And he essentially argued that if countries can bring something phenomenal to the table, then they may be able to make a deal with him. And so obviously that is something that a lot of these countries are going to be trying to do. The president already said today he was getting a lot of calls from world leaders, from business leaders, from auto leaders. He singled out specifically today as they are all raising questions and watching the stock market and certainly not dismissing it as much as we are seeing the White House do so, John.
Yeah, JD Vance calls it one bad day. It's been a few months of one bad days, and this was the worst single day in 5 years. Caitlin Collins, thank you. We're going to see you at the top of the hour on The Source, along with your guest, United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain. With us now is Democratic Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota, who's on the Finance Committee. Senator, nice to see you. You just heard Caitlin talk about the fact that advisors have been out over the course of the day saying, it's non-negotiable, it's non-negotiable. But the president himself said today, maybe there's some room to negotiate. Listen.
Are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good. For instance, with TikTok as an example, we have a situation with TikTok where China will probably say, we'll approve a deal, but will you do something on the tariff? The tariffs give us great power to negotiate.
So you think he's open to make deals to reduce these tariffs? And what do you think this new uncertainty will do to the markets?
Well, I mean, who the heck knows? What I know for sure is that this has been a disastrous day for our economy and for Americans. I mean, even JP Morgan says that he has just imposed the largest tax increase that we've seen in this country since the 1960s. And I can tell you, at home in Minnesota, people don't have any idea what's going on, but they see nothing in what the president is doing that is giving them any certainty about what's next. You know, you've got one billionaire in the president's administration saying, take this seriously, these tariffs are going to be our big money raiser. And then you have another billionaire saying, wait and see, don't worry. And right now, Minnesota farmers are trying to figure out how much they should pay for their input costs, what to put in the field, where their markets are going to be over the next 9 months. And there is nothing in what the president is saying that gives them any confidence in what is actually one of the worst farm economies in the last 25 years. So this uncertainty is absolutely deadly.
How well do you understand the methodology that the White House is using to impose these tariffs on specific countries based on the trade deficit the U.S. has with each country?
Yeah, so the president seems to believe that any time we have a trade deficit, that is bad for America and it is good for the countries that are buying our products. And it seems as if what they have done is put together some sort of nutty formula that identifies what this tariff should be country by country based on this formula. But it doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't think it makes any sense to the markets, to the capital markets who are looking at this and voting very clearly with what's happening with the stock market today. And understand, this is people's retirements. It is their 401ks that have just gone down precipitously. And it's not just one bad day. It has been a really bad couple of months for Americans and Minnesotans.
White House Senior Advisor Peter Navarro was dismissing concerns today that prices will go up because of tariffs. One of the reasons he gives is that he says that these foreign countries will manipulate their currency, and by that, it will help keep prices down. You're on the Senate Finance Committee. Presumably, you understand this better than most. How much sense does that make to you?
It doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, fundamentally, what tariffs are a tax. It is a tax that importers into the United States pay for products that are made in other places. And the ripple effects of what these tariffs, what happens with these tariffs across all of the various supply chains are really quite complicated and quite serious. I talked earlier this week with the CEO of a big hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in Minnesota, and she's asking herself, what's going to happen with with the supplies that I'm buying? How am I going to afford pharmaceuticals? What is this going to do to the construction costs that we're looking at for this big surgical center that we're most of the way through building? And I mean, across the board, this is about more costs for not only families, but also for small businesses, for hospitals, for our whole economy.
Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota, thank you for being with us tonight. Appreciate your time. With us now, Richard Quest, editor-at-large at CNN Business and anchor of Quest Means Business on CNN International. Also with Donna Swanson, reporter on trade and international economics for the New York Times, and Jennifer Welch with Bloomberg Economics. She previously served as director for China and Taiwan on the U.S. National Security Council in the Biden and first Trump administration. Richard, you're here with me. Just put this in perspective. Like, how big of a shock to the global economic system was this today?
This was unparalleled for a century. You are talking about a global trading system that has worked under certain rules, certain beliefs, certain philosophies, and all of a sudden the United States, far from being the surgeon's scalpel, he went in there with a chainsaw, a bulldozer, whatever you want to call it, and literally blew it all up. Existing trade relations, free trade agreements, understandings, allies. The best way to describe it, and I don't use these words lightly, what we saw yesterday and the market reaction today is as a result. This is economic vandalism on a giant scale. And why I tell you this, because if your neighbor is running over your garden, if your neighbor is making a nuisance of themselves with loud parties, you don't go next door and break the windows, rip off the door. You don't go and dig up their garden. That's essentially what he's done with these tariffs. And the administration might be very proud of what they've done, and they may believe that it's all going to be fine and it's going to boom. But I do not see a scenario in which that happens at the moment. And history, I'm afraid, is on my side.
So, Anna, one of the things the White House and the president continue to say is there will be some short-term pain, but just short-term. Is that what we saw today? Was today the short-term pain, or is there more to come, and what would that be?
Yeah, no, they kept talking about a transition period, acknowledging that there might be a little bit of pain, but in the longer run, supply chains will come back to the United States, factories will come back to the United States, and we will have, more jobs, more production here, and that'll be good for America. They're describing this as a transition period that might take, maybe until Q4. They've been a little bit hesitant to put a time frame around it. From my perspective, it takes a very, very long time for companies to think about building new factories, to think about shifting supply chains. It really takes years for that kind of process to unfold. And just speaking with, some company executives about how they're feeling, it seems like a lot of companies are uncertain whether or not these tariffs are even going to be in effect for the long run. So they may not have the motivation to begin shifting their supply chains if the president still is in deal-making mode, and those tariffs could come off. And that, implies that this could be a very long transition period indeed.
It's a great point. Some of the tariffs that he's imposing work to counter purposes here. If the job is to move jobs back here, then the ones that can be negotiated away don't help. They run counter to that. Jennifer, the Treasury Secretary said to Caitlin Collins last night that other countries should just take a deep breath and not retaliate. What's the likelihood they follow that advice? Do you think other countries will retaliate?
I think there are a number of countries that are going to make a bet that it's better right now to talk and to attempt to negotiate, offer concessions, and see what they can get out of that. In part because, as President Trump was just saying earlier today, he seems interested in making a deal. What the encompassing matters of that deal might be seems very open to negotiation, whether it's on tariffs, on non-tariff barriers, maybe additional investments on the United States have been other things he's portrayed interest in. I think there are a couple of countries, though, namely China, that have already vowed to take countermeasures, and they are probably pulling together a toolkit while also reserving some room for talks because they want to demonstrate that they can't be pushed around quite so freely.
Richard, as we all know, the stock market's not everything, but then again, the stock market's not nothing either. And today was a very big drop. Was it just the tariffs? And was it just the announcement they were reacting to? What will they be looking for tomorrow and in the days ahead?
No. It wasn't just the tariffs. This market was already worried. It was overbought. Valuations were too high. There were questions about DeepSeek, and there were questions about valuations and profitability under AI, all those sort of things. So this was a market that had a certain fragility about it to begin with. What this did was take away any form of prop. Now there is no reason. And you see this in terms of no one's talking about buying on the dips. No one's talking about that because everybody's just terrified about what might come next. And by the way, to the point of those jobs that he's hoping to bring back, the Peterson Institute will tell you those are jobs that he's hoping to bring back that should not come back to the United States. Why? Because the US is now a digital economy. AI, it needs to have a new skill set of advanced economics and advanced industry, not those older jobs of manufacturing. And so the risk is that this entire policy is pushing the US industry in the wrong direction to bring back the wrong sort of jobs, when what's needed is a much more modernized digital future.
And we talked a little bit with Senator Smith about the methodology that the administration is using to impose these tariffs on a country-to-country basis. How much sense does that make to you and to these other countries?
Yeah, so we initially thought that these tariff levels were calculated based on the tariffs of other countries, based on their trading practices, and that the administration had come up with a number based on that. But in reality, it actually was quite a simple formula, just the trade deficit for each country divided by U.S. imports from that country. So essentially, the president is very focused on bilateral trade deficits with these countries, with the idea of eliminating them essentially entirely if these countries want the tariffs to come off. And, frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense from an economic perspective. I mean, yes, the U.S. has a large trade deficit. There is an argument to make that it would be good for the economy to bring that down, to bring manufacturing back to the United States. But just focusing on bilateral trade deficits ignores the fact that, maybe we buy products from some country because they're particularly good at making them, or because they grow coffee, or, have some particular type of product that we want. So it totally ignores the idea of comparative advantage in trade.
All right, everyone stand by for a moment. We're going to pick this up after the break and focus more closely on the auto industry, which, as we mentioned at the top, is already fully engulfed in tariffs and counter tariffs and price hikes. Later, the firing of White House officials, apparently at the behest of someone who was not even part of the administration, the fringe right-wing activist Laura Loomer. Stay with us.
Sunday night, a Fareed Zakaria special. The ruthless gutting of government defining the Trump era. What paved the way? Fareed Zakaria examines the history behind the rage. The War on Government. A Fareed Zakaria special, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
Here I am, field trip chaperone.
Before preventing migraine with Qulipta, it was hard keeping plans.
And look at me now.
You'll never truly forget migraine, but Qulipta reduces attacks.
Brooke Rollins, and I want to remind everybody she's the one that said, if egg prices are too high for you guys, get you some chickens. Right. Get you some chickens in the backyard and just get your eggs that way. Here she is on Fox split screen the day after the tariffs are announced, trying to spin this yarn. And for those of you that are listening, on one side it has the Dow and all of these limp dick red arrows going straight down. And listen to this jet stream of bullshit she is trying to peddle on Fox.
Now, certainly the economy will be adjusting. The negotiations will continue. We are really, really excited and very grateful to President Trump's leadership and being willing to be bold and fearless in facing some pretty big policy challenges around the world. Certainly the economy will be adjusting. The negotiations will continue. We are really, really excited and very grateful to President Trump's leadership and being willing to be bold and fearless in facing some pretty big policy challenges around the world.
So what is the impact on farmers then?
Well, we'll see, right? I mean, we're negotiating. Now we move into some significant negotiations. I mean, I've got a great chart here. Oh, God. So, I mean, the split screen, we're so grateful to President Trump. And literally millions of people are watching their 401ks plummet. And a lot of these people, it's not millions and millions of dollars. It's earnest income that they put into the stock market, into their IRAs, into their 401ks, and then their employer matched it so that they can retire and enjoy their grandkids and probably hate watch Fox News. And that's what they're watching. That split screen, to me, is the epicenter of MAGA. Facts on one side, bullshit propaganda on the other.
And the coverage we've seen all across this chaotic day. And let's be clear, Trump's policies slapping a giant tax on Americans, as his former VP Mike Pence put it today. Numbers do not lie. We always try to show you the facts here and lead with the facts. And while some numbers are so bad that we can all reasonably agree it's not a good thing, it's a bad thing, I want to begin not with my observation or Nicole's or what we've discussed in plain English, but the numbers that show these are the most damaging tariffs in a century. And this is now, today, the largest stock slide since the global pandemic first arrived in President Trump's first term.
Markets look set to sell off as Donald Trump imposes the steepest U.S. import levies in a century.
I don't think there's a single positive take on this. This is all just bad.
Stock set to wipe out nearly $2 trillion in market value.
Taking a plunge as investors react to the sweeping tariffs.
The world was yesterday sort of bracing for a bazooka, but Trump decided he was going to go the Chicago way, and he dropped an economic Moab.
And they are going to turn it upside down, and I think 50-50 into a recession.
Markets tanking. Experts warning of a recession which would be self-inflicted by a new president in the beginning of the term, almost unheard of. In fact, to find a stock slide this bad, as mentioned, you have to go beyond any of the normal volatility. You have to go beyond the inflation-plagued Biden term. And you have to go back to that unusual moment, which we all shared together, when the world began to grasp that it was facing a global pandemic in COVID. The market is a collection of companies and people reacting to events. And it began to quickly absorb how bad the pandemic was going to be. And that was the last time we saw this large a drop. Stocks suffer biggest one-day wipeout in value since that March 2020 pandemic is the Wall Street Journal's headline today, a kind of a Bible for Wall Street. You can see the steep plunge in the combined drop there among the 500 largest companies. Those are the biggest companies that trade publicly. And you can see the reaction quite clear to the Trump tariff announcement, these new tariffs that escalate what was already a costly trade war. It is hard to put the numbers, which I told you is how we're leading tonight, so you can just remember some of the basic math, but it's hard to actually put them in perspective. I could tell you that that is a sudden, seismic 4.8% drop in all of those stocks, the 500 stocks traded on S&P, or I could estimate the value. It's a rough number, but it is a big one. That drop constitutes, in response to Trump's plan, which he was warned against, over $2 trillion lost here. Similar story on the Dow, down about 4%. The other broad stock exchange, the NASDAQ, even worse, plummeting 6%. This is the math. Numbers don't lie. These are the new Trump tariffs, which, as many people warned, many experts warned, and many Trump allies, Republicans, Wall Street veterans warned, are now sinking every market index, battering U.S. stocks. Another way to put it, if you're not into all the numbers and the composites and what's it all mean, if Donald Trump had just done nothing yesterday, if he had just not shown up to work and done any new policy, we'd be trillions dollars richer in our economy. Trillions would not be lost. That's what it meant for him to go to work yesterday and do what he does. Now, let me show you one more. I didn't want to kind of overdo all the indexes, but the broadest measurement you can do of companies, not just the big ones. If you hear Bernie Sanders and other people talk about the fat cats on Wall Street, but of course, a lot of things run through companies in our capitalist system. You have medium-sized businesses. You have small-cap businesses, which might not be your local restaurant, but they're a lot smaller than some New York-based big conglomerate. If you look at the measure that includes more companies, they're actually hit the worst. In other words, I mentioned that 4% was trillions. The 2000 index of the companies that include smaller companies located in other parts of the country, et cetera, they're actually taking it the worst. And there's a lot of Trump voters and, frankly, a lot of people in general affected. But that's down 21% from its market high. These tariffs from Trump are escalating the trade war to new heights. They're guaranteeing more countermeasures in the trade war as they hit every country, big or small, rich or poor. Take one conservative magazine that tracks this very closely, The Economist. They call it now Ruination Day, showing President Trump quite literally sawing the U.S. off the map. A self-inflicted wound, isolating us from the rest of the global economy. It's a contrast from a few months back under Biden, when The Economist, which is a right-leaning kind of pro-corporate but internationally objective magazine, that's what they say they are, commented that at that point we had the economy that was the envy of the world. More headlines today. Trump tariffs sinking markets, economic havoc, Wall Street reeling, stocks plunging. That is the brutal reality. And since you watch the news or listen to the sound of your MSNBC anchors telling you what's happening in the world, you are probably reasonably informed, and you probably follow politics to some degree. This story is well beyond politics and news nerds, if you will. It's my job to sometimes tell you, hey, it's a little bit of a slower news day, or this thing may not break through, or we had a Senate vote, but it's not going to pass the House, so it's not the biggest deal. Today's the opposite. I have to tell you, this is a big deal. This is very bad. This is not one of those things that will be viewed through different partisan lenses, and it can't be lied away, because a lot of people are going to be paying higher prices and worried about a recession and U.S. jobs will be affected, and the charts show it's all a response to Donald Trump's plans, which he didn't have to do. Think back to Biden, Obama era, Bush. Do you ever remember a major announcement of indiscriminate tariffs that sunk the economy? No, because it didn't happen. It didn't have to happen. This is Donald Trump's choice. We are living in Donald Trump's America. And if I may, there were a heck of a lot of people, including on Wall Street, who said, don't worry about the rhetoric. This can be good for business. They were wrong. They may not admit it, and they may start telling different stories about what they said, but he had the business support, he had the tech support, he had a heck of a lot of people who want lower taxes saying, it'll be good for business. Wrong. Let's look at the response from business as it rolled in to Trump's tariffs.
With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
Big market sell-off this hour. It is ugly out there. The S&P 500 down 3.7%.
If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America.
Burning down the house to cook a steak. That's the line.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. In many cases, the friend is worse than the foe.
We've seen the anger in the responses from many of those allies, just the shock, the worst-case scenarios that were being contemplated.
Those were the numbers. Direct response. You heard one of the finance journalists say, burning down the house. I wish it was a Talking Heads reference. I wish we were all just dancing to David Byrne, but burning down the house to cook a steak is a reference to a type of financial idiocy that is so outrageous and predictable. Global economy, which people tried to tell you last year. It's not like Donald Trump handled the COVID crisis and crash all that well. That's one of the reasons he himself has said the response to COVID and the way things were going then. He said that's part of why he lost in the rare times when he's not lying about losing. And now, Donald Trump, 70 days in, has brought us back the worst market crash since the COVID pandemic, but because of his own policies. Another way to track this, a top CEO actually shared a moment of candor on what these recorded public earnings calls are, because it was all happening and the CEO reacted to the drop of their company's stock in real time.
In this race, and where's our stock now? I mean, really? Oh, okay. I just looked at the screen. I hadn't looked at it. It got hit when I think the tariff came out.
Yes, it did, because the numbers don't lie. And you have the announcement and then trillions lost. There are economists at Yale who say the tariffs could cost you, a typical American household, close to $4,000 per year. So if this continues, that's $8,000, $12,000 counted up. And depending on your spending habits, or if you ever want to buy a car, it would be more than that. That's just an average. This is math, not politics. But the fact that it's math does have other consequences. This undeniable reality has some Trump allies objecting, others trying to talk about this without lying about it and saying it's all good, because that's a tough message to sell right now. Now, Trump does demand a certain loyalty. As mentioned, he's pressured people to say he lost the 2020 election, but if you're going to be his political ally, you have to lie and say that he won. So that's the context. A lot of spinning and exaggeration and lying in the MAGA movement, but even some who flirt with some of that type of stuff are trying a different tune about this math that can't be explained away, this market crash. Everybody knows what's happening here. I just showed you. Trump caused the crash, the pain, and some are acknowledging on the right that pain will hit Americans.
No pain, no gain. That's what we used to tell our football players. There's going to be some pain with tariffs.
And there could be some pain along the way. Yeah. But you will be thankful once you go through the tough stuff.
There's absolutely going to be short-term pain. The president's been clear about that. Everyone has.
I'm behind the president 100%. There'll be disruption and pain on the front end.
They have to sell pain, because even in a time where everyone is used to folks spinning everything, if they went out and said, no, this is good, up is down, it's good to lose 20% on those smaller businesses around the country, they'd be laughed out of the room and maybe shown the door in their jobs and districts. So they say, yes, it's painful, but please, try pain for a while. Other Republicans are telling Trump to stop the pain. Rand Paul has dealt with Trump, and he's not now appealing to ethics or empathy for the people going through this. He's not trying to wage a factual policy debate. He is appealing to political self-interest, a kind of a double message, not only for Trump, but also for other Republicans who might look at the long term and future elections. And he's making a throwback to the pictures you see on your screen, which is how far back in history you have to go to recall how tariffs ended Republican careers.
Tariffs have also led to political decimation. When Hot Smoothie put on their tariff in the early 1930s, we lost the House and the Senate for 60 years. So they're not only bad economically, they're bad politically.
Fact check, true. There's wide economic data, plus these new indicators about how this works if the tariffs are completely untargeted and you just stoke a trade war. And the politics are obvious. It's the economy, stupid. I mentioned that quote from Trump's own former VP. Quote, here it is in full. The Trump tariff tax is the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history. It may take a lot more time to see the full reaction and scope. There could be more gyrations. We could have more news nights where we're talking about this kind of stock volatility. But the absurdity overall is clear. Trump has slapped tariffs on an island where the only inhabitants are actually soldiers at a joint U.S.-British military base. There are tariffs that hit islands that are uninhabited, unless you count the penguins. As the markets were plunging this afternoon in what is clearly a crisis, the worst crash since when COVID arrived, Trump said, I'm good, I'm out, goodbye. Little wave, little walk. He left work and the White House during this time of economic crisis when you'd want leadership, no matter what caused the crash, to get on the chopper, to go to Florida. He's taken a long weekend to watch a golf tournament and, by extension, promote one of his properties. This is not a drill. This is what's really happening. The election is over. This is the time for governing. And the report card from Wall Street on Donald Trump's governing today is whatever comes below an F. We've got two experts when we're back in 90 seconds.
Mopping is hard work. Then I tried the Swiffer Power Mop. It has a built-in solution that breaks down dirt on contact. Plus, its 360-degree swivel head cleans up along baseboards and even behind the toilet. Bye-bye, bucket. With the Swiffer Power Mop.
Your record label is taking off, but so is your sound engineer. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our advanced matching helps find talented candidates so you can connect with them fast. Visit Indeed.com/hire.
If you're living with HIV, imagine being good to go without daily HIV pills. Good to go, unscripted. Good to go, on a whim. With Cabenuva, there's no pausing for daily HIV pills. For adults who are undetectable, Cabenuva is the only complete, long-acting HIV treatment you can get every other month. It's 2 injections from a healthcare provider, as few as 6 times a year. Don't take Cabenuva if allergic to its ingredients or taking certain medicines that may interact. Serious side effects include allergic reactions or rash, post-injection reactions, liver problems, and depression. If these occur, get medical help right away. Tell your doctor about your medicines or supplements, medical conditions, liver or kidney problems, mental health, pregnancy, and breastfeeding. The most common side effect is injection site reaction. With Cabenuva, you're good to go, without daily HIV pills. Talk to your doctor about switching.
I wonder what our grocery bill is going to be like. I wonder if we can afford to upgrade our car when it breaks down.
The last time we did across-the-board massive tariffs was 1929, and there were bread lines.
I think it's really going to hurt our pocketbook.
Citizens, voters responding today to what we're living through. We're joined by Catherine Rampell, expert in this field, also going to be a co-host in our upcoming MSNBC Weekend lineup. Welcome. And Washington Post's Libby Casey. Catherine, What's happening today, and how does it measure up against those historic lows?
Markets are finally realizing that Trump meant what he said when he said he was a tariff man, when he said he planned to impose global tariffs of at least 10%, regardless of whether countries were friend or foe. And frankly, it's remarkable that it's taken market participants this long to realize this, given that he was quite open about it on the campaign. For whatever reason, when Trump talked about tariffs again and again and again, all corporate America heard was, oh, what was that? More tax cuts?
Right.
And not the thing that he emphasized. And now we are seeing the bloodbath that results.
Yeah. Say more. I want to draw you out on that first specific point, because Mitt Romney, a great poet, as we know, once said, corporations are people, my friend. And on the one hand, it was derided because he was suggesting they should get the rights of people. But on the other hand, corporations are made up of people. And you're reminding us that the people in the markets were, as humans, kind of looking the other way on what this guy said he would do.
I think they were wish casting is basically what happened, that they didn't really think that he planned to wage these trade wars because it was so obviously a bad idea, right? Economists are pretty much unanimously against this idea, just as they were back in 1930 when the prior version of this, Smoot-Hawley, passed. There was a huge petition of economists then warning it might potentially lead to something like a Great Depression. And there's a huge, horde of economists of all political stripes and ideologies today who had warned that this would be really, really bad. And so I think that market participants, CEOs, people who are, by the way, paid to get these things right, paid to get these forecasts right, assumed, Trump will have enough people around him who advise him that this is bad. Maybe market declines will, in fact, chasten the president if he goes down this road.
Have they met him?
That has... Well, the first term, of course, there were some adults in the room, and Trump did seem somewhat sensitive to market reaction to various actions he took. This time around, clearly the adults are gone, but beyond that, the market plummeting seems to have only emboldened him somehow. Today, he suggested there might be more tariffs to come on pharmaceuticals, on semiconductors, lots of other important things that American consumers and American companies need in order to survive and make their own products. So I don't know what the objective is at this point for Donald Trump. He has listed a whole bunch of contradictory objectives. Is it about negotiating leverage? Is it about raising revenue? And those objectives are somewhat in tension. Is it about, engendering some sort of manufacturing renaissance, which will not happen given the way he has imposed these tariffs? Nobody knows. Like, just on its face, it seems like such a dumb idea that, in a way, maybe markets were rational to assume that he would not go down this road, except Trump himself is not a rational guy. He's a tariff man, as he says, and instead he has decided to turn what had been the envy of the world, as you point out, the U.S. economy, which was a very robust economy, into something that now we're talking about a recession imminently within the span of like 10 weeks.
Libby?
Well, it could have been a bargaining tactic, right? To Catherine's point, I think lawmakers, some business leaders thought this is just part of the posturing, the bluffing, the businessman making moves, and then he would back down. We were hearing that from financial advisors and other people who were saying this is just sort of part of the process. But what we were hearing from Republicans today was a very different message. The press secretary of the White House, her message was trust Donald Trump. Now, that might work with Republicans in the House. It seems like it's already working less with some Republicans in the Senate. We did see a bipartisan bill come out today. Chuck Grassley of Iowa, a Republican guy with a lot of farmers in his state, paired up with Maria Cantwell, Democrat of Washington state, to put forth this bill that would require Congress to actually approve any tariffs. Remember, they do have this role to play here. They would have to approve them within 60 days of being floated by the president. And the White House would have to cough up some information and show how the tariffs would actually impact Americans and businesses. But there's not a lot of hope that that bill would actually get anywhere. I'm watching to see if other Republicans will join in. And then the big thing I'm going to be watching is what happens when all these lawmakers go home for recess, which is coming up very soon. Yep. They'll be home for a long time in April, and they're going to get an earful from Americans who have a lot of questions and concerns.
And Libby, you don't need to be a market expert watching at home to see the pattern. Nicole Wallace was mentioning Peter Navarro, he's a big China hawk, and the position he was put in by the president. But the Signal debacle, the incompetence on immigration, separate from whether you think there should be tougher or weaker immigration enforcement, they make mistakes. They've got a lot of people who are inexperienced, that's the most respectful way to put it, for these posts. And so even the tariff experts that he has great resources in the federal government to draw on while they fire a lot of people and gut that stuff. Newsweek has the headline, Trump puts tariffs on islands inhabited only by penguins. And so they're the wild, most remote places on Earth. We've got the internet weighing in, pay the tariffs, and the penguins are taking their business elsewhere. And the penguins are known, as you know, Libby, to be reasonable. So to upset them that way. But it speaks to a level of incompetence that anyone who did any basic research would say, well, let's pull out these other uninhabited islands because they have no economic result, and we would look like we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the reactions of world leaders, it's like they are having such strong reactions because they are going to be impacted just like American consumers are. And so they're looking at what appears to be some sloppiness, some quickness, some moving fast and breaking things, which is like the ethos of Elon Musk now applied to not just the American federal government, but the global economy. And so, it's one thing to talk about what happens in uninhabited or relatively uninhabited islands. It's another thing to talk about what happens with some of our biggest trading partners. And the fascinating thing is that Trump is really going after our friends, our allies. They're getting hit a lot. And there's really like a questionable logic there that Catherine knows a lot more about. Why would you not be hitting countries like Russia in the same way that you're hitting our close allies who we do a lot of business with?
Yeah. Libby and Catherine, thanks to both of you. Coming up, I can tell folks we have more revelations about Trump ousting national security experts based on right-wing conspiracies. And Marco Rubio and others have long warned that a day like today could come if there was a leader incompetent enough to overdo tariffs. That day is here. I'm going to show you the tape. Also, the growing anti-Trump protests, the pushback, and what a week for it. Stay with us.
Actually, that's why this moment is so worrisome to me.
Yeah, you know a lot about this, and I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that Trump talked a lot about business, but a lot of his background was being a TV host and a reality show host and someone who sold wine branded with his name. But with all respect to the voters, I understand that some people thought he says he's going to lower prices. He says he knows about business. He says he's going to lower prices. He says he knows about business. Give him a shot. You're in a business where I know you don't insult voters. So people thought that. Here we are today. What do today's results tell you about his business acumen? And is he gambling with American jobs in a recession?
Well, he's a big talker. He's a big promoter. Remember, his success in the real estate world has just been promoting. Not much else. He's not very good at financing. Remember, he went bankrupt a couple of times. And this is a guy who is trying to put himself forward as a great businessman. But today, well, yesterday, he basically shot the U.S. economy in the foot. And we're now all going to suffer from this. You're going to see, I mean, we've seen estimates of this. You know, a U.S. automobile, a U.S.-made automobile is going to cost $3,500 more. A foreign-made automobile, $5,000 to $15,000 more. Buying a home, you know, lumber prices, all the things that go into building a home, buying homes is going to be more expensive. And of course, I was just in Mexico on a trade mission, just came back yesterday, as a matter of fact. And what you're hearing from them, from the business people there, same thing you're hearing here, which is uncertainty is terrible for the world economy and for the U.S. economy. And the result is that people are going to hold back on making investments. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. And one thing they know is it's bad for their economy, it's bad for the U.S. economy, bad for Canada. And yet we all know that what we really need is to bring down prices, and Donald Trump is raising prices for ordinary Americans. It's exactly the opposite of what his voters voted for. And I think it's important for us to point this out to people. And the result, by the way, is people now are beginning to see that as the prices are going up for the things that they care about, and as he's failing and they're discovering he lied to them, they're voting against Republican candidates across the board.
As for the Trump side, here's what one of his top economic voices, Lutnick, is saying.
Is there a red line for you pulling back and saying, okay, hold on, we're going to rethink things?
No, you know, I mean, come on, the markets. When Donald Trump was the president last time, he put on tariffs. And if you go back and look at that news, everybody said, oh, my gosh, oh, my gosh. And the stock market, as you heard him say yesterday, up 88% during his presidency. So what you've got to realize is, sure, there's going to be some short-term movement, but this is a reordering of global trade.
Is this just short-term movement?
Here's what happened today in the markets. Business people, investors from around the world that invest in U.S. markets are basically pulling back and recognizing that the medium-term and long-term prospects for the United States under Donald Trump are worse than they have been in quite some time. So a 5% downdraft in the market in one day is just the beginning. They understand that there is likely to be a recession caused by Donald Trump, that because of the tariffs, taxes essentially are going up on ordinary Americans who keep this economy going and who are going to pull back themselves. And we're already seeing, like, Stellantis laying off hundreds and hundreds of people. This is going to happen across the board, and it's very disturbing. This is self-inflicted. This is not COVID. You know, Donald Trump did nothing to counteract COVID, and we saw what happened to the markets back then as a result. But this is Donald Trump literally causing COVID and bringing that to the markets with his tariffs. The tariffs are a tax on ordinary Americans, and they are like bringing COVID back. It's going to have a long-term effect on Americans.
Yeah, and as far as the economy is concerned, you don't want to bring COVID back. We saw Mike Pence say, this is, like you just said, a tax. We saw Rand Paul say, in a warning to the entire Republican Party, past tariff failures like Smoot-Hawley cost them a generation of voters. Do you view it as that dire for them? And we heard from Schumer as well today. What are the Democrats offering in the alternative?
Well, maybe we should start by recognizing that what Donald Trump has done puts him in the category with Herbert Hoover, who put us into a depression. And that's my great worry. And so let's begin with the average folks out there are beginning to recognize that. And you saw on Tuesday the results of elections that really proved they came out to vote against what Donald Trump is trying to do. So is there a recognition that Republicans are failing? There sure is. Now the question is, what's the alternative? It's obvious to me that, you know, we're the party, Democratic Party, is the party that fights for working people. We're the ones who want to raise the minimum wage. $7.25, no one can afford to live on that. That's $14,000 a year. We know that that minimum wage, which has been around now for, what, 15 years, is way too low. We ought to be at least doubling that in the United States. If you ask Republicans, they don't want to raise the minimum wage. In fact, they would like to get rid of the minimum wage. So that's what they think of working people. They are not the party of working families. We are. We're also the ones who want to make sure that everybody has health care. They're trying to take health care away. Look at what they're proposing to do about Medicaid. They want to take Medicaid in my state away from perhaps up to 1 million people. We have 3 million people that need help with health care. They're going to take a third of those people off of health care. That's going to cost you more, not save you money. So I'm very deeply concerned for average folks out there that are affected by this. But if you want to know what the political impact is, you started to see it on Tuesday. But Democrats, we've got to get out there and talk about the things that we're for. And like I said, we want better wages. We want health care for everybody. We want, sure as heck, we want to make sure that everybody is able to get a good education. Donald Trump tore the Department of Education apart.
Yeah, on quite a tough, historic news day for the country. Appreciate getting your views here. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ari.
Absolutely. Coming up, a new national security crisis at the White House. And we were just talking about tariff history. We have the Ferris Bueller moment that reminds you what everybody knows about failed tariffs.
Introducing Allison's black psoriasis. She thinks her flaky gray patches are all people see.
Otezla is the #1 prescribed pill to treat plaque psoriasis. Over here. Otezla can help you get clearer skin and reduce itching and flaking. Doctors have been prescribing Otezla for over a decade. Otezla is also approved to treat psoriatic arthritis. Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts.
With clear skin, girls' day out is a good day out. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla.
Who's coming in the driveway? Goodness.
My daughter is being treated for leukemia. I hope that she lives a long, great, happy life and that she will never forget how Mom and Daddy love her. St. Jude, this is what's keeping my baby girl alive.
You can join the battle to save lives by supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. For just $19 a month, you'll help us continue the life-saving research and treatment these kids need now and in the future.
Cancer makes me feel angry, not in the, feel on the outside, just the inside I'm angry at it.
When your kid is hurting and there's nothing you can do about it, that's the worst feeling in the world.
1 in 5 children diagnosed with cancer in the U.S. will not survive.
Those that donate to St. Jude, I hope that you will continue to give. They have done so much for me and my family.
Join with your debit or credit card now, and we'll send you this St. Jude t-shirt that you can proudly wear.
Están salvando vidas. Y la vida de mi hija es una de ellas.
You ready to go have some fun? Yeah!
When we came here, we didn't know what tomorrow would hold. St. Jude showed us that tomorrow there's hope for our little girl to survive.
Let's cure childhood cancer together. Please donate now.
Hi, glad everyone's here. Let's get started.
When they want to squeeze up,
Let me share my screen. Okay, sorry about that. I'm excited to share the...
they want a squeeze up.
Deliciously delectable delectables.
Squeeze up! Did you know 80% of women are struggling with hair damage, just like I was?
Pantene Miracle Rescue Deep Conditioner with Melting Pro V Pearls.
Locks in moisture to repair 6 months of damage for resilient, healthy-looking hair. If you know it's Pantene.
You've put up with your old shower for too long. It's outdated, unsafe, and it's time to replace it. But why struggle with a lengthy shower remodel when Jacuzzi can do it in just one day? And there's no need to break a sweat or your budget.
Right now, we're waiving all installation costs, plus offering 0 interest and 0 payments for up to 1 year.
So you can finally convert your old bath to a safer, easy entry shower, complete with a custom seat, grab bars, and slip-resistant floor, installed in 1 day.
My overall experience with jacuzzi has been wonderful. Everything was customized to the way I wanted it for the price that I wanted to pay.
I've had a great experience from start to finish.
Don't take matters into your own hands. Do it the smart way. Give Jacuzzi Bath Remodel a call.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com. We're waiving all installation costs and there's no interest and no payments for up to 1 year. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-990-5365. That's 800-990-5365. Call now.
America is finally free from the tyranny of being able to buy stuff from other countries.
Yes, there's many different ways you can point out the problems in this now failed tariff policy as the markets plunge. Listen to how Trump's own allies, people that he has empowered enough to be a part of his team but apparently aren't getting through to him, how they warned about what was a fairly well-understood economic issue.
A tariff is a tax on Americans. A tariff isn't paid by the exporter. China's not going to pay the tariff. The buyer is going to pay the tariff.
Donald Trump has proposed a 40% tariff, which is a tax on all of you. I think raising your taxes by 40% would kill jobs.
China wins when we fight with Europe. China wins when the American consumer has higher prices because of tariffs that don't affect Chinese behavior.
That's what they said, because remember, even if you don't follow trade policy closely, this isn't one of those 50-50 issues. So while the parties do sometimes debate aspects of targeted tariffs, overall, both parties have said you want to avoid a global trade war. Here was President Reagan 30 years back.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs.
Millions lose their jobs. Economic historians note, by comparison, the new Trump tariffs are more widespread than any president and even broader than the infamous example of a failed trade war, the 1930 Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Those are seen by the light of day after many years of study as something that worsened the Great Depression. Now, I said you don't have to be an expert, but Smoot-Hawley tariffs are one of those things that are part of common historical conversations and a very memorable moment where part of the baseline joke was if the students didn't know the truth, the teacher was trying to show them tariffs are bad, from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
We're joined by Margaret Carlson. I will tell Margaret it did not work, and we sunk into a Great Depression. Welcome on a tough day for people who are paying these costs. We've covered the numbers a lot. Your view on that baseline political point. Many Republicans and others attacked these tariffs because they were bad for the economy and thus bad politics.
And everyone seemed to know that, even some people in Trump's cabinet, that's just how it is with tariffs. It's not hard. It's just not hard to figure out. Even Ferris Bueller's teacher knew it. And, you know, if you were to go to Congress and say anyone, every one of them, even the ones that we don't think of as this, you know, the smartest in the world, they would know that. And they know that because they want to get reelected. And it's a simple matter. You know, there's a lot of times when you can figure out what Trump is doing by tracing who he has a grudge against. But he doesn't have a grudge against, say, Lesotho, who's up there at around 45 or 50%. It's, you know, it doesn't really make sense, except that Putin's gotten away scot-free. Now, I think the White House said, well, but, you know, we don't there are already sanctions on Russia. It doesn't matter that much. That's not what it is. But, you know, it falls into a pattern that I do understand about Trump, which is he wants to lay off Putin. Putin is not in his sights. He supports Putin against Zelensky, and he supports Putin against having tariffs imposed. But that's the only, I just can't see it. And for the Tesla, Elon Musk, it doesn't seem to have mattered, does it, Ari, about his company? He seems to just be so rich that he can let his company lose millions and millions and millions of dollars and be kind of carefree and go off to Wisconsin and put on a cheap hat.
Yeah, but it may matter in the long term. I mean, we have that history.
I love Tesla. You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall. This is really amazing.
Or maybe even a year after that. These things take time. And it's just very disappointing to see that so many people who voted for the president, who believe that he's going to make the best decision for them, are just literally being sold up the river without a paddle.
And Brendan, just on what Simone was saying, there has not been, I think, a clear enough explanation on why these tariffs are being instituted and what are the reasons that they could be removed. And so I'm just thinking, for example,
Nasty day, and I mean real rough. The word will get out, and it will end immediately. He's Hitler.
He's got absolutely no empathy or compassion for people.
I love Tesla. You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall. This is really amazing.
People are saying mimicked.
In nearly a decade, Putin is calling up 160,000 more Russian citizens to his military. That is the largest conscription in Russia in at least 8 years. And the numbers are really incredible. We just went back and looked at this. Get ready for this. Putin's army has grown from 1 million to 1.5 million people in his military. 1 to 1.5 million. So right now, Putin's army is 50% bigger than the night before he invaded Ukraine. He's added 500,000 more people into his military. This is stunning when you consider how many people are dying a month on his front line. And despite this massive increase, right, largest conscription in 8 years, military 50% bigger than before the war, Trump is taking Putin at his word still that he wants the war to end, which may be part of why Russian TV is now mocking Trump.
We were a great country before America was even discovered as a continent. Not to mention, before America became a nation. Could we imagine, as the New York Times admits, that we would fight America in a war and win? Now we're doing it every day.
Dan Rice is out front now. He is the former special advisor to the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. Also, of course, himself spent time in Iraq and now a lot here in Ukraine. Dan, I want to ask you about Putin's draft because the numbers are just so stunning. First, though, I want to begin with something that happened here just in these past hours. A strike in Ukraine this weekend, attacks in restaurants in the city of Dnipro. We're showing images of it now. You were actually there. Physically there, and you say it was your closest call that you've had in years. At this point in the war, what happened?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Aaron. And yeah, it's incredible that every night the Russian terrorists continue to terrorize Ukraine all across the country. I was in Dnipro, which is a beautiful city down south from Kyiv, and close to the front lines, and we were attacked by Russian Shaheeds. Those are the Iranian-supplied drones that attacked the city and hit all civilian targets. Like, it's ridiculous. These are just terrorists. The Russians hit the several restaurants and a military hospital they were targeting, and it was a pretty massive attack. We were very close.
And this is as there's some sort of a whatever. I don't know how many quotes you can put around the words ceasefire, but this is what's going on just here in these past hours. And in that context, Dan, let me ask you about what we are learning today, that Putin is ordering 160,000 more troops to come into his military. That's an increase from last year in his conscription, and that his military overall is 500,000 more people now than it was in February of 2022 before he invaded Ukraine itself. So what is the state of the Russian military right now?
Yeah, it's incredible, Aaron. I mean, this is Putin is accelerating the buildup of men, arms, munitions, and is on a war footing. 40% of the GDP of Russia is now going to weapons. It's not going to stop just at Ukraine. I mean, there's a very serious concern that it will continue on to other countries, Moldova, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. That's why they are all arming. That's why they are. This is a very serious situation. Russia is losing.
Can you give us an update on how that's going?
We do. We have an envoy from Russia. We're talking about it. We'd like to see that stop as soon as possible because thousands of people are being killed a week. Soldiers, mostly soldiers, and Ukrainian soldiers and Russian soldiers. And you're losing 2,000, 3,000 sometimes a week. So we're spearheading the drive to get it done. Europe has not been successful in dealing with President Putin, but I think I will be successful.
Yeah, hey Betsy.
On the topic of deportation flights, were you informed of Judge Boasberg's March 15th verbal order to turn planes around, and were you involved in the decision to defy that order?
I don't think anyone defied an order by a judge. That's pending in court right now. I think our attorneys have argued in court. I think there were arguments yesterday. We're awaiting a ruling. I anticipate this will go to the Supreme Court, be ruled in our favor. I don't believe anyone defied a court order. I think testimony came out in court that those planes not only had taken off, but were outside of American airspace. Moreover, they were illegal aliens from El Salvador, just like these guys on this chart, who are committing violent murders throughout our country. They were
additional tariffs targeting the United States, and this is a response to the global tariffs. President Donald Trump announced that on Wednesday, and Beijing is now saying it will impose tariffs of 34% on all U.S. goods. So that's some breaking news there, and that the measures will come into effect on April 10. That's in less.
Tonight, we begin a series of reports from Taiwan. The leader of the self-governing democracy of more than 23 million people argues the island is already sovereign and independent, but Beijing calls it a renegade province and vows to one day unite it with the mainland, either peacefully or by force. Nick Schifrin recently traveled to Taiwan and joins us now. So, Nick, what did you find?
Jeff, Taiwan has long been the most tense flashpoint between Washington and Beijing. By law, the U.S. is required to help Taiwan defend its democracy, which also produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced computer chips. This week, China's People's Liberation Army launched new drills and sent ships that ringed around Taiwan. The U.S. said the moves, quote, put the region's security and the world's prosperity at risk.
The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium has announced the sudden passing of one of its most beloved residents, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. On March 25, 2025, the 33-year-old silverback died from a sudden cardiac event. Despite immediate medical efforts, he couldn't be revived. Now, gorillas, just like humans, are highly susceptible to heart disease. Harry had been receiving treatment for a cardiac condition since 2022 with guidance from the Great Ape Heart Project. But sadly, his time came sooner than anyone expected. Harry wasn't just any gorilla. Born at the Cincinnati Zoo on June 14, 1991, he moved to Pittsburgh a year later and quickly became a favorite. Over 3 decades, he grew into a gentle but strong leader. After the passing of Mrithi in 2024, Harry stepped up as the troop's protector, becoming a father figure to the little ones. The zoo's curator of mammals, Kelsey Forbes, described him as amazing with all of the gorilla kids, and said he had the best laugh of them all. If you ever met Harry, You'll remember his fiery red hair and playful personality. He loved keeping visitors on their toes, sometimes even giving them a friendly scare. But behind his playful antics was a sobering truth. Western lowland gorillas like Harry are critically endangered, facing habitat loss and poaching in the wild. His passing reminds us how precious these animals truly are. Harry will be deeply missed by the zoo staff, visitors, and all who knew him. If you have a favorite memory of him, the Pittsburgh Zoo is inviting everyone to share stories on their social media pages. The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium remains committed to the conservation of western lowland gorillas and will continue to provide exceptional care for its remaining troop members. Rest in peace, Harry. You were truly one of a kind.
From the Pittsburgh Zoo, they announced the death of a longtime family member, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. The 33-year-old gorilla died of a sudden cardiac event yesterday. The zoo says he was loved by staff and visitors since he came to Pittsburgh all the way back in 1992.
In the early 1990s, died today after suffering health-related issues. Zoo staff say that Marithi passed away during a procedure after going into a sudden health decline. The 31-year-old male gorilla had been suffering from mobility problems and spinal issues. The zoo says Marithi was one of their most popular animals, and he was a pioneer for gorilla conservation. He had 3 offspring, all of whom are still at the zoo.
New York could soon become the next state in the country to ban cell phone use during school hours. New York Governor Kathy Hochul and state lawmakers are nearing an agreement to institute an all-day ban on cell phone usage in schools known as bell to bell in a push to address the negative consequences of social media on kids. More than a dozen states have instituted complete phone bans or restrictions on cell phone usage in schools. We turn now to a new documentary, Can't Look Away, that exposes the tragic consequences of social media use on young people. This is the trailer.
Tell me exactly what happened.
I'm trying to give him CPR. I need to give him CPR.
Okay, but that's
I'm trying to give him CPR.
Ma'am, I need you to take a breath. I need to know what happened.
Blew his head off.
I feel like TikTok just put the gun in his hand and told him, pull the trigger.
How many more children have to die because Snapchat chooses profits over safety?
I was stopped 7 times. I don't know of any other kids that OD'd on fentanyl that are still here.
The Social Media Victims Law Center. It is a law firm founded for the sole purpose of holding social media companies accountable for the harms that they're causing children.
Let's say I'm a dealer. I can easily locate you. Hey, I'm going to be at the park around the corner. You can come meet me here. It's like the platform was built for that.
I found my son's lifeless body due to fentanyl poisoning. They have the best distribution system in the world, and nobody has stopped them.
What do you say to those parents, Mr. Spiegel?
I'm so sorry that we have not been able to prevent these tragedies.
For years, because of Section 230, the doors to this courthouse and the entire American legal system was closed to them.
These products were specifically designed to be addictive to adolescent brains, and this is known to the defendant.
It's just me and Glenn and Laura down here up against the most powerful, richest companies in the world.
People say David and Goliath, and I said, it's not Goliath, this is Leviathan.
We're gathering evidence that is going to show the judge that Snapchat's full of it. They say that we don't know how it works. We know how it works. Hi, Michael. We're going to make a difference.
This is the first case that's ever been tried in this way, based on the design of their algorithm, based on the design of their platform, not the content.
My son and his girlfriend had had disagreements. Imagine having that sadness and you're searching for help, and what you're getting is suicide content.
These companies have been gaslighting us for years.
This is all about money.
The purpose of all commercial ventures is to create a demand.
Our children are the casualties.
We need to take back the power from these companies.
They created a dangerous situation and then manipulated these kids.
They know the levels of addiction, sexual abuse. They know the levels of suicide. They're not showing our kids what they want to see. They're showing you what they can't look away from.
We all
feel empathy for the plaintiffs and their losses, but plaintiffs have not and indeed cannot assert any legal theory under which SNAP would be held accountable.
These parents are going out there every day and re-traumatizing themselves.
I will never see his face again or hear his laugh. If this can save even one person, it'll be worth it.
This is a fight I've been training for 30 years. All right, let's go to war.
Can't look away. Can't Look Away, the case against social media, a new documentary directed by the award-winning film team Matthew O'Neill and Perry Peltz, inspired by an investigation into child safety online by Bloomberg News journalist Olivia Carville. Today, Olivia wins a George Polk Award for her reporting, and the film begins streaming on Jolt and also starts a theatrical release, a theatrical run here in New York City at DCTV's Firehouse Cinema, DCTV, where Democracy Now! Used to broadcast from. We're joined now by the director, Matthew O'Neill, and the lawyer featured in Can't Look Away, Laura Marquez Garrett, an attorney at the Social Media Victims Law Center in Seattle, which represents 4,000 children. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Matt, first talk about why you did this film.
You know, when Perry and I were first introduced to this subject through Olivia's reporting and through the team at Bloomberg News, we had that sense that probably many of your listeners and watchers have, that social media is vaguely bad, that it's invading kids' lives, that it's leading to addiction or too much screen time. As we got into the cases and we met the families that the Social Media Victims Law Center represent, and we learned the details, and we heard from Laura and from Matt, it overwhelmed us because it is so much worse than you imagine, so much worse than we ever imagined what's being fed to children on all of these social media apps.
So, Laura Marquez Garrett, you were this high-end lawyer in Seattle, coroner office. Your future was made. Your kids would be very well taken care of. You have 4 of them?
I do, 4 small children, yes.
And 2 are identical twins?
Yes, the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you decided to leave that. Why?
Because I have 4 small children. And so when at the time, they're young enough, my oldest are 9, and I was not aware of what was happening. And when I first heard and I met Matthew Bergman, our founder, I said, well, what social media harms? I had no idea what was happening. When I met with him and read his first complaint, Selena Rodriguez, an 11-year-old who died by suicide about 2 years after she got her first iPad, I then watched Social Dilemma on Netflix. And when I saw these designers saying, of course we don't let our children use these products, the attorney in me, defense bar, I was a member of the defense bar, by the way, not a plaintiff's attorney, the attorney in me said, if these manufacturers and designers and distributors don't let their own children use these products, they're not only harming kids, but they know it.
Tell us the story of 16-year-old Mason Edens.
Mason Edens, a young man in Arkansas, friends, family, no history of mental illness, and he goes through heartbreak. He goes through a breakup. And, his parents, the devices they keep an eye on him. They make sure that he's not watching them too much. What they don't realize is that TikTok algorithm, when it turns, it can turn fast. And Mason is going through heartbreak. So as he's looking for things like inspirational quotes, motivational speeches, TikTok begins to send him heartbreak and even suicide. I mean, we have a screenshot where he says, I think it's inspirational quote, and he gets sort of the, she never loved you, she never will.
I want to go to this 2022 case. I hate to call Mason a case. His mom is Jenny DeCirio. He dies at 16. She later examined his phone, as you're describing, and finds these TikTok videos that he liked that directly promoted suicide, some of which remained on the platform more than a year later. This is DeCirio, his mom, speaking to the Scrolling to Death podcast.
What I didn't realize is how quickly an algorithm can change. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that overnight, literally liking one video an algorithm can completely flip. And so in less than 2 weeks' time, the algorithm flipped on TikTok. So I was that parent that was involved.
So I don't know, Laura, that people really understand when you say, oh, the algorithm and it sends him down the suicide path. Explain exactly what happens.
Yes, so I want to start by saying what many adults don't realize is that these products, they're not designed to hook us, adults, they're designed to hook children, right? There's internal documents that say, get them young, the younger the better. Literally, that's a direct quote. And so these products work differently for kids. So when Mason Edens is depressed and sad, the platforms know that and they exploit it. And so when he is searching for inspirational quotes, if they were to show him things like, hey, it'll be okay, go talk to your parents, go get some sunshine, right? What would he do? He'd stop using. And they don't want these children to stop using. They program for engagement. So what parents need to understand, everyone needs to understand, our children are having a very different experience on these products. It is not only the content that's being sent, it's the volume, it's the manner, it's the overwhelming nature, and the addiction that various mechanisms are creating such that they cannot look away.
Why are teens particularly vulnerable? Maybe that's a very obvious question.
Well, no, it's the development of their frontal lobe. And in fact, there are public meta documents with brain scan pictures saying like they're more vulnerable until they're about 24, 25 because the development of their frontal lobe, they're more, I mean, think about how our children act. Look, I have young children and sometimes I'm like, what is going through their head? They have not yet, their frontal lobe is not developed. They don't have the same reasoning or judgment that we do.
Charles Barr worked as an ad sales manager for TikTok in Germany. In 2021, he grew concerned about the app's algorithms pushing dangerous content. So he alerted company leaders, but his warnings went unheeded. Let's go back to another clip from Can't Look Away. It starts with Barr.
I think TikTok as an app has a positive side when it comes down to impacting culture. But what I see is that the platform is really not a safe environment for anybody within the young audience.
AI is pushing content that they know will be provocative, something fearful or anger-inducing, because we know that the more kids are steered towards this emotional content, the longer they'll stay online.
We asked hundreds of thousands of teenagers, have you ever received unwanted sexual advances on Instagram? 1 in 8, 13 to 15-year-olds. Yes, in the last 7 days.
If it has anything to do with drugs, it's going to be on Snapchat. This is where it is 90% of the time.
They're petrified of being held responsible for the deaths of minors. It's a perfect storm of corporate greed for maximum profitability.
So it started with Charles Barr. Matt O'Neill, if you can explain and also talk about fentanyl and drug use and what TikTok has to do, for example, with this. There's a huge discussion about TikTok right now, like, is it going to go dark? Who's going to buy it? But this is not the discussion that's taking place.
So much of the conversation is about foreign policy and China and who owns it. What Charles is bringing to the fore is this sense that TikTok entraps children, that it's not what they're looking for. I think we think sometimes you use social media to look up a news topic, or you think that these kids might be searching for drugs or suicide. That's not what's happening. They're being fed this content. It's not their choice. These aren't bad kids. The parents aren't bad parents. They're just without any real recourse in terms of facing these billion-dollar corporations. When it comes to fentanyl-laced pills, it's Snapchat. Snapchat has become a platform where young people have access to drug dealers. And the unique way their messages disappear is really appealing to someone who wants to sell drugs to a minor. And these fentanyl-laced pills that young people are often buying thinking that they're not fentanyl, they don't know that they're buying fentanyl, has led to an unbelievable number of deaths.
We just saw the trailer, and in it is a young man who's in a wheelchair. Laura, tell us his story. He didn't die.
Right. Well, his heart stopped several times, right? And actually, so I was going to say, I mean, this is the stories people need to hear, the truth of what's happening. I have talked to many children who have said the same story over and over, which is, I was 12, I wanted to use Snapchat for the silly filters. You know, my coach, my parents, my teacher showed them to me. I began using Snapchat. I had never heard of marijuana, and all of a sudden, my feeds are filled with it. I'm getting these quick ad recommendations, and Snap says this is your friend. Not only do they say to children, we tell them watch out for strangers, so Snap said, okay, this is your friend, and I'm going to give you points when you snap this person. You may know them. This is what it's all about. This is fun. They make it look safe. And so I talk to these children who say, look, I'd never heard of drugs, and then I'm getting drug menus, and Snap is saying, this is your friend. I'll give you streaks and scores and trophies and charms. And so I add them, and now I've got drug menus. And by the way, now it looks cool. Like, there's kids my age doing this.
And what do the CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg understand? We only have 30
Everything.
seconds.
They know. They know.
And what does that mean? How are you holding them accountable? Your organization, right. Social Media Victims, represents 4,000
right.
kids.
They are putting profits over people. They have known for years that they are hurting children. They have concealed that fact from all of us. They have told us their products were safe so that they can make billions and billions of dollars with no accountability. And until we start holding them accountable, they have no reason to change.
Laura Marquez Garrett is a lawyer with the Social Media Victims Law Center in Seattle. The film centers around her and many of the
that it is Heartbreak Hotel for Elon Musk, that Trump is already set the soil to break up with him. Trump takes off for Mar-a-Lago to hang out with his rich Saudi golf friends. And Musk is somewhere in some hole on Twitter boosting lies. Put up this tweet. We've got Alex Jones, who is a complete nut job liar of the highest order, trying to say that there is overwhelming evidence that the Wisconsin Supreme Court race was stolen. Elon Musk retweets it and puts, And I want to point out that this is who the MAGA men have to hang out with and who they have to boost, because for them, facts are painful. So they have to default back to propaganda because facts are the kryptonite to this jet stream of bullshit in which MAGA operates.
Southern Lebanon. The IDF says Hassan Farhat orchestrated several terror attacks against Israeli civilians and IDF troops. This as IDF ground troops begin operations in northern Gaza to expand what they call the security zone. The IDF says the troop activity will help eliminate, quote, numerous terrorists and dismantle Hamas infrastructure. Meanwhile, Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says the IDF bombed a school in Gaza City, killing at least 27 people and injuring 70. The IDF says it was a Hamas command center. Let's bring in ABC's Marcus Moore in London. Marcus, how does this strike in Lebanon affect the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel?
Well, right now, it does not seem to have had a specific impact on the ceasefire, but the potential is there. And if you consider that Israel has already been carrying out a number of strikes in Lebanon, mostly in southern Lebanon, even with this ceasefire that was agreed to back in November. The most recent strike that took out a top Hamas official, Hamas confirmed that one of their commanders was killed in that Israeli airstrike in Sidon, that's in southern Lebanon. And this strike was, Diane, carried out on an apartment building there. And Hassan Farhat, or also known as Abu Yasser, was killed along with his daughter and son, according to a Hamas statement. Now, Israel has accused Farhat, quote, of orchestrating numerous terror attacks against Israeli civilians and IDF troops. They said that he was also responsible for the rockets launched towards Safed on February 14th of last year that killed several soldiers. And so that's what we've learned about that particular strike, Diane, and the strikes do continue not only in southern Lebanon, but also in Gaza.
Marcus, the IDF says its ground troops are allowing civilians in Gaza to evacuate as they conduct operations there today. What more can you tell us about these troop movements and where the civilians are going?
Well, first of all, in terms of where civilians are going, there's not a lot of safe places for them to go at this point, and that's been an ongoing issue with this war in Gaza. But we're learning that in the process of the IDF expanding their military presence in Gaza, they're operating in new areas between Rafah and Khan Yunis in the south. The IDF says it's trying to separate Hamas fighters in Rafah from Khan Yunis. That's part of their strategy there. And they say with the overall goal to prevent any future attacks on Israel and to protect Israel or Israeli citizens from any further attacks. And so that's why they say we're seeing what we're seeing in Gaza at the moment.
Marcus, it's been more than a month since Israel has allowed aid into Gaza. Any movement on that front?
At this point, the aid organizations are still sounding the alarm on this, Diane. As you know, March 2nd was the last time aid was allowed into Gaza. And what we've heard from organizations and officials there is that, for example, the World Food Program, they say that they've been able to continue with hot meals for families there, but that those supplies are likely to run out in 2 weeks, Diane. Also, there are a number of bakeries that have shut down. 25 of them, the World Food Program says, have been shut down because they don't have fuel or flour. And so that reinforces the voices who are urging for there to be some type of ceasefire, Diane, at the very least, to allow critical aid, food and aid to get into Gaza for those families who are caught in the middle.
All right, Marcus Moore, thank you.
The U.S. government is trying to ban this drone. Here's why. My friends
ordering people to head to shelters in the west of Gaza City, which is already overwhelmed with hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians who took refuge after they got threatened by the Israeli occupation forces, like the areas of Beit Lahia, Jabal refugee camp. And now these people have no place to go to after the brutal months of the Israeli war. Worth mentioning is that these people have been displaced at the early beginning of the war to the south of Gaza City. They returned to the north in Shija'iyya to find their homes completely and partially destroyed. They set up tents and lived in the neighborhood, but after the new forced evacuation order, this is the scene in the Shija'iyya neighborhood.
For over 15 days, we've endured artillery shelling, but it's now more intense than ever. They were firing non-stop. The walls collapsed on us, our families, friends and neighbors. Some were killed, others managed to escape with their lives. Our biggest struggle now is displacement. I rented a cot, but now we have no idea how to handle this situation. I'm heading west of Gaza City, looking for any street where I can set up a tent.
Amid the ongoing Israeli closure of the border and the blockade on humanitarian aid, the situation is getting much more dire as the starvation is imminent, and these people are going nowhere without basic necessities, food, water, or any medical care these people can get access to.
The situation in Gaza is unbearable. People have no flour, there's hunger, humiliation, and conditions are getting worse. We are being forced to leave and we don't even know where to go. The Israeli army keeps issuing evacuation orders, pushing us from place to place. We are exhausted and completely broken. I left my home with nothing. This is all I could carry.
This is the situation from inside Al-Shija'iyya neighborhood east of Gaza City.
Bacco, and I am the assistant mammal curator here at the Pittsburgh Zoo.
And I'm Roseanne Giambro, the primate keeper here in Pittsburgh.
And this little guy is our newest addition to our gorilla troop. And the reason why he's not with his family group is because he had to be pulled for hand rearing. For the first 4 weeks of his life, his mother was doing everything appropriately. She was a wonderful mother. He was nursing, he was thriving, and he was doing wonderful. The keeper started noticing, though, that he just seemed a little off. He wasn't thriving. So we started really watching the interactions between baby and mom. And we noticed that mom wasn't allowing him to nurse as much. And then eventually he just stopped trying to nurse altogether. So as a team, we decided it was time to intervene and check him to make sure that he was healthy, and also check to see if mom was healthy. At that time, we found out that mom had severe mastitis. The baby was slightly dehydrated, but actually was in perfect health. Now with mastitis, as a woman, we all know that the best way to get past mastitis is just to continue nursing, get through the discomfort, and eventually everything will turn out right. With a gorilla mom, you really can't tell her, just work through the discomfort and everything will be fine. So it was a hard decision for us, but we decided that the best thing for mom and baby was to actually pull him out and hand rear him. We then put the mother, Mocha, on antibiotics. She recovered fully, but at that point, once she was fully recovered, she no longer was producing milk. So at that time, we started raising him in the nursery. We got a whole team together. We're calling it our surrogate team. Because our ultimate goal is to get him back in with his mom and his family group as soon as possible. So right after the first day, and we found that he was okay, he was healthy, we started bringing him back down. And Roseanne was the keeper that did take the baby down to visit mom.
And it was wonderful to see the family's response to him. All of the family members came over. The very first response was Dad did a double take and he came right over to look at the baby. Mom came in, that's Mocha, she came into the room next to me screaming, and usually gorilla screams don't frighten me, but it was a frightening scream. She saw the baby, and once she calmed down, then she seemed to be better with me taking care of the baby. And as time went on, not the first day of course, as time went on I was able to hold the baby closer to the barrier so that the gorillas could smell him and touch him, and he can do the same. And they seem to be comfortable with me taking care of the baby. What's wonderful is that their attention and their interest has continued, and he's now 10 weeks old, and each day we try to keep him in the company of his family for about 4 hours or more if possible.
He is on exhibit, and it's all weather pending. And weather pending, it could be rain, but it could be extreme heat too, because they do sweat just like people. So it's very careful that we watch monitor his temperature. So before he comes out on exhibit, we check his temperature. So we check his weight, we check his temperature, and also check his girth to see how he's growing. When we take him back off exhibit, we also check his temperature again, make sure he's not getting overheated.
Back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired. Thank you.
Oh, careful. Careful with that salute.
It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a...
It's okay, it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to have maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries. Or they simply will not be those countries.
Aber der ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch ein Nazi. Hm? Nazis, 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 lauter Nazi.
USA, 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 USA. Yes. No, dog. No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Coast to coast in the U.S. for so-called Tesla takedowns, outraged by Elon Musk and Doge's massive cuts to the federal workforce. It comes as the electric car maker is facing acts of vandalism and other crimes. Here's ABC's Morgan Norwood.
Tonight, from New York to Washington to Los Angeles to San Francisco and even abroad, Tesla Takedown, a global day of peaceful action demanding an end to Elon Musk's influence over Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, and its sweeping federal cuts.
We're going to put pressure on the administration, but also on Congress to stand up to them.
Organizers claim Musk's Tesla fortune helped him secure a role in the Trump administration, overseeing Doge and slashing government funding.
We don't think that Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, should be in charge of doing things like that.
Protesters are urging boycotts, calling on Tesla owners to sell their EVs and dump their stocks. While today's protests remain peaceful, recent weeks have been anything but. The FBI launching a task force in response to earlier attacks, including incendiary devices found at a Tesla dealership in Austin, Texas. And in New York, investigators looking for two people who they say carved the word Nazis and a swastika into a Cybertruck. Musk on Fox News warning the Trump administration.
Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. And yes, we married in 1992. And yeah, we were married for about 2.5 years or so, and didn't work out. We divorced. We had Ali at that point. And she went off and she married another man, and she was married to him for 3 years. And then she left him, and then we met up again and we remarried. Who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. The time I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra. I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. And yes, we married in 1992. And yeah, we were married for about 2.5 years or so, and didn't work out. We divorced. We had Ali at that point. And she went off and she married another man, and she was married to him for 3 years. And then she left him. And
there's a 42-year age difference between the two.
That's right. They say age is only a number. I don't know. They say I don't look 78. Anyway, I think I look 108.
Well, and a lot of people, they have a problem with this because when she was 4 years old, you were her stepfather, and then you go on to have children with her.
Well, yes, you know, I was her stepfather, but she had 3 stepfathers afterwards. You know, so I was a one-time stepfather. She had 3 stepfathers subsequently. So, you know, I'm not the current. But, I mean, you know, all I say is show me the rules. I'd like to see the rules. Please show me the rules. I want to see the rules for love and war. Rules. I'd like to see the rules. Please show me the rules.
Africa. And we should all be selling Teslas, not buying them, selling the stock.
Wonderful wife. And it was amazing that she, you know, put up with playing second fiddle to me all those years. She, you know, she showed later on that she was capable of much more. I think a father I'm very hands-on. I try to be there. You know, as Elon once said about his family, every day is Christmas in his family because we buy things for the kids all the time. In fact, he learned that from me because in our family, and now as well with the kids, you know, every day is Christmas. It becomes a problem because we don't know what to buy them for Christmas because every day they've had Christmas all through the year, every time we get together. So kind of difficult to find something that's more expensive on a Christmas, you know. The third time I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. And yes, we married in 1992. And yeah, we were married for about 2.5 years or so, and didn't work out. We divorced. We had Ali at that point. And she went off and she married another man, and she was married to him for 3 years. And then she left him, and then we met up again and we remarried. Who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. The time I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra. I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. I married Hader, who's the daughter of my two daughters, Alexandra and Rose. And yes, we married in 1992. And yeah, we were married for about 2.5 years or so, and didn't work out. We divorced. We had Ali at that point. And she went off and she married another man, and she was married to him for 3 years. And then she left him. And
there's a 42-year age difference between the two.
That's right. They say age is only a number. I don't know. They say I don't look 78. Anyway, I think I look 108.
Well, and a lot of people, they have a problem with this because when she was 4 years old, you were her stepfather, and then you go on to have children with her.
Well, yes, you know, I was her stepfather, but she had 3 stepfathers afterwards. You know, so I was a one-time stepfather. She had 3 stepfathers subsequently. So, you know, I'm not the current. But I mean, you know, all I say is show me the rules. I'd like to see the rules. Please show me the rules. I want to see the rules for love and war.
Nazis, lauter Nazis.
USA, 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 USA.
Yes. No, dog. No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Field. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
1988. Throughout Germany and Austria, thousands of Jewish people are startled awake by the sound of breaking glass and roaring flames. Synagogues set aflame, businesses and homes pillaged. 91 people die, 30,000 people sent to the camps, 7,000 businesses destroyed, 900 synagogues burned to the ground. According to PBS, a report back to the US State Department from an American official in Leipzig said of the event, having demolished dwellings and hurled most of the movable effects to the streets, the insatiably sadistic...
Like one real rough, nasty day, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. He's Hitler! And then they say, he's a Nazi! I'm not a Nazi. I'm the opposite of a Nazi.
Of them, it's just this amorphous group of people. But they're smart and they're vicious. And we have to defeat them. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy.
Papers belong to the family of Mark Abrams, a social scientist who worked with BBC's Overseas Propaganda Analysis Unit and the Psychological Warfare Branch during World War II. Written just as the war was starting to turn against Hitler, it shows that British analysts had noticed signs of developing paranoia in his speechmaking and, chillingly, a growing preoccupation with what he called the Jewish poison. At the time that it was written, the tide had started to turn against Germany, Anthony said. In response, Hitler began to turn his attentions to the German home front. This document, however, is there, and the smears work in the same way. People who are already primed to hate the target of the smear will use it to justify and intensify their pre-existing disgust, and will push them from irritation and harm. In response, Hitler began to turn his attentions to the German home front. This document shows that British intelligence sensed this happening. McCarthy recognized that, faced with external failure, the Nazi leader was focusing on a perceived enemy within instead, namely the Jews. Given that we now know the fight was commencing, this makes for poignant reading. And you don't have to go much further from there to connect the horrors of the Third Reich to the promises and the lies of the Trump campaign. The lies he repeated during the presidential debate about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs, painting them as monsters, was compared by multiple outlets to the blood libel, the age-old conspiracy theory that Jewish people used the blood of Christian children to make matzah, the textbook anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and on its face, a ludicrous smear. So too are these lies about Haitians. Although I don't quite feel comfortable drawing a direct line here for reasons of, well, history, and also because animals and babies, they're two different things. The spirit, however, is there, and the smears work in the same way. People who are already primed to hate the target of the smear will use it to justify and intensify their pre-existing disgust, and will push them from irritation and harsh words closer to outright violence. Those who recognize it rightly as a falsehood dismiss it as ridiculous, because it is. But it is important that we recognize that it is as dangerous as it is false. This is an important tool in radicalizing the people that Trump needs to get his violent work done.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You don't need to be a historian to see the obvious connections between accusing Jews of eating children and Haitians of eating pets. And since the Haitian Revolution, Americans have often treated Haitians as the embodiment of the terrifying racial other, in the same way that Europeans displaced their fears and resentments onto Jews. Marianne Williamson helpfully made the subtext the text in a tweet, saying that Democrats dismiss
cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You don't need to be a historian to see the obvious connections between accusing Jews of eating children and Haitians of eating pets. And since
I love Tesla.
You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
This is really amazing.
You're disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching a war that would have never happened if I was president, and a war that would have never happened if I was president, and
Democrats are determined to call more witnesses when the Senate trial begins. They especially want to hear from the White House budget official who told the Pentagon to withhold military aid to Ukraine. New explosive documents show Michael Duffy made that phone call just 90 minutes after the controversial conversation between Trump and the president of Ukraine. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
House and Senate leaders still at an impasse over the Senate impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump. Republicans want a quick trial, possibly with no witnesses. But Democrats are demanding to hear from White House insiders, including Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and White House budget official Michael Duffy.
What is a trial with no witnesses and no documents? It's a sham trial.
Just released court-ordered documents show Duffy told the Pentagon to withhold military aid from Ukraine on July 25th, 90 minutes after President Trump asked Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden. And Duffy told the Pentagon to keep it quiet. Duffy was subpoenaed by the House in October but refused to testify. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still...
I love Tesla.
You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
This is really amazing.
So I think he's going to live up to what he told me, and I think he's going to fulfill his part of the deal. Now, then you have Zelensky, and hopefully he's going to live up. I see he's trying to renegotiate the rare earth. You know, we did something because, as you know, the Europeans get paid back the money that they gave, and we don't, because Biden is an incompetent president. And he should have asked for rare earth, or he should have asked for the loans to be guaranteed in some form. That's what Europe did. Europe is in for probably $100 billion, and we're in for $350 billion. So we're in for more than 3 times. And now you could make it a little bit less than that, but it doesn't matter, whatever the number. We're in for substantially more than Europe. We could be in for $350 billion. They have no...
Catalina Marceau-Dabru is here in studio. Catalina, you're taking us back to our top story this evening. We'll be fact-checking Donald Trump's latest claims about the war in Ukraine. Tell us more.
That's right, Sharon. Let's begin with these statements made by President Donald Trump today, who gave remarks on Ukraine at his Mar-a-Lago residence. We hear him saying that the U.S. gave Ukraine $350 billion.
I believe $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's
so as he says, a bit less than that, perhaps. He continues to say that Europe has given a very much smaller percentage in aid, about $100 billion compared to the $300 billion so that was given from the U.S. President Donald Trump has continued to insist on this number, even in writing, even some hours ago on his Truth Social and on X, where he continues to say that President Zelensky talked the U.S. into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. So it's actually a lot less than $350 billion. There are many numbers swirling around regarding the exact number of U.S. contributions to Ukraine. We'll be using the numbers published by the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. They have their own Ukraine support tracker that shows that the U.S. actually allocated about 114.2 billion euros or $119 billion, give or take, but not $350 billion per Donald Trump's claims. This graph also helps us debunk vis-a-vis his comments regarding Europe, where he says that the U.S. gives more aid to Ukraine than Europe. You can see that according to the same study, Europe has allocated about 132.3 billion euros or $137 billion in help for Ukraine, ahead of the 114 billion euros from the U.S.
In the early 1990s, died today after suffering health-related issues. Zoo staff say that Marithi passed away during a procedure after going into a sudden health decline. The 31-year-old male gorilla had been suffering from mobility problems and spinal issues. The zoo says Marithi was one of their most popular animals, and he was a pioneer for gorilla conservation. He had 3 offspring, all of whom are still at the zoo.
The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium has announced the sudden passing of one of its most beloved residents, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. On March 25, 2025, the 33-year-old silverback died from a sudden cardiac event. Despite immediate medical efforts, he couldn't be revived. Now, gorillas, just like humans, are highly susceptible to heart disease. Harry had been receiving treatment for a cardiac condition since 2022 with guidance from the Great Ape Heart Project. But sadly, his time came sooner than anyone expected. Harry wasn't just any gorilla. Born at the Cincinnati Zoo on June 14, 1991, he moved to Pittsburgh a year later and quickly became a favorite. Over 3 decades, he grew into a gentle but strong leader. After the passing of Mrithi in 2024, Harry stepped up as the troop's protector, becoming a father figure to the little ones. The zoo's curator of mammals, Kelsey Forbes, described him as amazing with all of the gorilla kids, and said he had the best laugh of them all. If you ever met Harry, you'll remember his fiery red hair and playful personality. He loved keeping visitors on their toes, sometimes even giving them a friendly scare. But behind his playful antics was a sobering truth. Western lowland gorillas like Harry are critically endangered, facing habitat loss and poaching in the wild. His passing reminds us how precious these animals truly are. Harry will be deeply missed by the zoo staff, visitors, and all who knew him. If you have a favorite memory of him, the Pittsburgh Zoo is inviting everyone to share stories on their social media pages. The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium remains committed to the conservation of western lowland gorillas and will continue to provide exceptional care for its remaining troop members. Rest in peace, Harry. You were truly one of a kind.
From the Pittsburgh Zoo, they announced the death of a longtime family member, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. The 33-year-old gorilla died of a sudden cardiac event yesterday. The zoo says he was loved by staff and visitors since he came to Pittsburgh all the way back in 1992.
You're disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching a war that would have never happened if I was president, and a war that would have never happened if I was president, and
Democrats are determined to call more witnesses when the Senate trial begins. They especially want to hear from the White House budget official who told the Pentagon to withhold military aid to Ukraine. New explosive documents show Michael Duffy made that phone call just 90 minutes after the controversial conversation between Trump and the president of Ukraine. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
House and Senate leaders still at an impasse over the Senate impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump. Republicans want a quick trial, possibly with no witnesses. But Democrats are demanding to hear from White House insiders, including acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and White House budget official Michael Duffy.
What is a trial with no witnesses and no documents? It's a sham trial.
Just released court-ordered documents show Duffy told the Pentagon to withhold military aid from Ukraine on July 25th, 90 minutes after President Trump asked Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden. And Duffy told the Pentagon to keep it quiet. Duffy was subpoenaed by the House in October but refused to testify. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still...
Security agency with regards to these firings. We have reached out to get some comment, and so far no confirmation yet, so everything is coming through unofficial sources.
How long before we have a new NSA director, and what does that process look like?
Well, there are requirements. There has to be a 4-star general or admiral who is in charge of the organization, who has that rank or is eligible for that rank to take over. Essentially, it's going to be just like any job opening that required for such a senior military official. It's going to require a nomination from the president, and at that point, there'll be a Senate confirmation hearing, and then the next official will be put in place of both Cyber Command and the National Security Agency. That could take some time as they tried to find an individual. It's unclear how quick of a process this was. We know from our reporting that Ms. Loomer was involved and that she made some recommendations apparently to the president. The question then becomes, what kind of suggestions may be made for potential successors, given that she has made some allegations that these individuals were removed because they were carryovers from the Biden administration. So I think a lot remains to be seen about who comes and steps in and what time frame.
So what's happening at the NSA in the meantime, and how are workers there reacting?
Well, we have no confirmation yet from the National Security Agency that this has taken place. When we've reached out for comment, they're redirecting questions to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The job is going to continue, Diane, and that job is to intercept communications around the world that are then used to guide further intelligence analysis by the U.S. intelligence community. So that job is going to go uninterrupted. And like I said, there are now acting officials who have taken the place of Hawk and of Noble. But I think one of the real concerns is the message that this is going to have among senior military officers, the potentially the chilling effect, as I'm referring to it, among senior military officers about what might be grounds for their dismissal in the future.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs.
That was in 1987. Also resurfacing from 1996, comments by Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi on the U.S. trade deficit with China.
In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal?
She was saying at the time it was unfair. Joining me now is economist Douglas Holtz-Eakin, president of the American Action Forum. He is former top economic advisor to President George W. Bush and Senator McCain, and the former head of the Congressional Budget Office. It's great seeing you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
What do you think Reagan would be thinking right now about the president's tariff policy?
Oh, he was not a fan of this kind of economic policy, no question about it. He was a big believer in keeping taxes low and flat and not interfering with the economy. This is a major tax increase. I don't think people quite realize that what he announced is comparable to simply letting the 2017 law sunset. No one wants that to happen because it would mean a recession. So just what we've got on the table now is really quite threatening to the economy. Mr. Reagan wouldn't have supported that, and he recognized that there's other damage. There's damage to international relations, and there's feedback in the form of retaliation that makes the economic damage worse on all sides. And that's where we are right now.
And Doug, because the status quo as it has existed for the United States for decades now has not worked for the American worker.
I think this is a naive view of the global economic order and the American economy. The notion is that somehow manufacturers are going to rush into the United States, build factories, and employ people in manufacturing. 8% of Americans currently work in manufacturing, down from 30 in the 1950s, and that decline is not due to continuous cheating by other countries. It's the fact that we're good at some things, advanced manufacturing, so we do very high value manufacturing, and other countries are relatively good at low-tech manufacturing, and we trade. That's a natural economic order. What they're trying to impose is an unnatural economic order. The tariffs are supposed to balance trade between every country in the United States. Trade balances come from capital flows, trade and services, which they ignore entirely. We have trade surpluses with 130-odd countries. So this naive view that we can pick a tariff, balance trade, get people to jump back in the United States is at odds with the global economic order. It's not going to reshape it. It's going to impose big costs, and those costs are being borne by Americans and American workers in particular.
Many people is that they will not accept an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires control our government, where the wealthiest person on earth, Mr. Musk, is running all over Washington, D.C., slashing the Social Security Administration so that our elderly people today are finding it extremely difficult to access the benefits that they paid into, where Mr. Musk and his friends are slashing the Veterans Administration so that people who put their lives on the line to defend us will not be able to get the health care that they are entitled to or get the benefits that they are owed in a timely manner. Slashing the Department of Education, slashing USAID. And why is all of this slashing taking place? It is taking place so that the wealthiest people in this country can receive over $1 trillion in tax breaks. Now, I don't care if you are a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. There are very few people in this country who think that you slash programs that working families desperately need in order to give tax breaks to billionaires. Mr. President, I am the former chair of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. And I've had the honor of meeting with veterans in my own state of Vermont, all over Vermont, but all over the country. These are the men and women who put the uniform of this country on and have been prepared to die to defend our nation and American democracy. And these veterans and Americans all over our nation will not accept an authoritarian form of society with a president who undermines our Constitution every day. Every day there's something else out there where he's undermining our Constitution.
Israeli bombardment and devastation. 2/3 of Gaza has now been declared a no-go area or subject to forced displacement orders by the Israeli military. Now, all of that is according to the UN Agency for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and it says that 65% of Gaza's territory is now under Israeli military control, either designated as a no-go zone or under forced displacement orders. Israel has kept all of Gaza border crossings closed for more than a month, denying entry to much-needed food, medicine and even fuel, and also leaving 2.1 million Palestinians trapped, bombed and starved, it says. That's the UN agency also saying, chillingly, that nowhere and no one is safe in Gaza. Now, earlier, Israel launched a new wave of strikes across Gaza. At least 28 Palestinians have been killed since dawn on Friday, and one of the attacks struck a residential building in Khan Yunis, where 19 people were confirmed dead. And the Israeli army said it launched a ground assault in the Shujaiya area. That's in northern Gaza. It followed Thursday's forced displacement order. Israel plans to establish a so-called buffer zone and also security corridors in Gaza, effectively cutting it off from the strip. Well, let's speak to Hani Mahmoud, who's live for us in Gaza City. Hani, I mean, this is a real statement to say that 2/3 of the population in Gaza has nowhere safe to go. And that area was already blockaded before the war happened. A tiny strip, not much space, overcrowded and overpopulated areas. And now the Israelis seem to really be squeezing the Palestinians.
Sarah, it does seem to be permanent this time, the displacement, the feeling that people had over the past 18 months, that the ongoing displacement activities going on, the enforced evacuation orders, all feed in one conclusion. It's permanent. And just give you a sense of what's going on here. Just over the past 12 hours, we reported from this area as of last night, okay? And as early hour this morning, we showed up before we went to Al Ahli Hospital. Now we are back to the same spot here to broadcast. But that was largely empty. There were no tents here, no displaced people in this particular area. But now, because other areas are becoming overcrowded, people are taking this area to set up their tents. As you can see from the frame of the camera, here's a person who just landed here, just arrived here, that dropped the stuff on the ground, thinking of taken this spot to set up of the tent. It was until we talked to him, until we get this live going on, he can set up his tent. But near him, another one that was set up at earlier hours, and a third one, a fourth one, and we talk about hundreds of tents just within a span of a few hours. This is the level of displacement, the level of displacement that people are dealing with, the level of misery of life going on and unfolding by the hours. It's actually more than 2